Chapter 11:15. Aha, so you're losing your head out of fear right now? Emoya, who hadn't returned for an entire night, called Luo Nan the next morning. She laughed quite unrestrainedly after listening to Luo Nan's account. Luo Nan frowned. How could it be that serious? You're acting like this. You're like parents who have muddled along for over a decade. When their child is in his rebellious phase, or even later, they suddenly discover that their child is completely different from the growth model they expected. They feel that the product they nurtured for so many years is basically going to be scrapped. It's impossible to reforge it. Then they panic and despair, not knowing what to do. Isn't this the feeling? Luo Nan continued to deny. It's not that exaggerated. You're using this as an analogy. It seems like you've experienced it before. It's fine to just observe. Observe the mental processes of Mr. Mo Haihang and Mrs. Luo Shuqing a few years ago. You can more or less learn a few things. Of course, I've also gotten involved in this mess myself. Huh. Luo Nan's mind went blank. You. That's right. Did you forget? I'm the one who provided you with the Dream Fund. I funded a 10-year-old kid to do a drug experiment. Even though the results are pretty good and the return on investment is super high, I was quite anxious when I recovered from my second chunibyu. Hee, so your funding was the choice of a chunibyu? Could it not be? In order to take care of your so-called dream, there was an extremely high possibility of harvesting a younger brother who overdosed on drugs and died. Just thinking about it makes my hair stand on end, okay? As Emoya spoke, she also sighed. From this point, I can understand your current feelings. Thank you, little brother. You've worked hard. Emoya soon laughed. How should I put it? I still feel like you're overreacting. Even though you may be the one with the most power in the family, you don't need to burden yourself with Rui Wen's matters. You need to know that the loss of her memories before she entered the family wasn't caused by you. Even though she was brought into the family by you, you're just an older brother in terms of family ethics. You're not a parent. But Aunt? She certainly wants you to take responsibility, right? You might really be the person that Rui Wen wants to be close to the most. Even 10 sentences from others can't compare to a single sentence from you. But you still have to look beyond the surface to see the essence. Did my mother want you to be the head of the household? Come on, they still have a long way to go before they retire, and they're the kind of people who worry a lot. How stupid can they be to let you be the leader of this family? There seemed to be someone laughing beside Emoya. It should be a woman. But Luo Nan wasn't in the mood to pay attention to these things. He just pulled the corner of his mouth. Then what does Aunt mean? She only wants you to look inward and arrange a mission for you at home so that you will have a sense of belonging as a family member instead of being a so-called world-class expert who goes to the upper class for no good reason and considers the life and death of mankind every day and night. Emoya concluded, this is a scheme, a family scheme. You're right. Luo Nan pondered for a moment and felt that it made some sense. But he soon came back to his senses. But aren't you off topic? What you've said to me, I admit it's reasonable, but Rui Wen, what's the situation? What should I do? This? Emoya was clearly stumped. When all is said and done, you don't know. I only have you as my experience in inexplicable success. I'm going to take this out to deal with Rui Wen. Let's not talk about anything else. Can you be at ease? Emoya's reply was bold and confident, but she soon admitted, her reaction really is quite unexpected. Luo Nan sighed. Emoya seemed to be talking to someone beside her. A short period of time passed before she spoke again. Don't think too much right now. People like you will go overboard when you think about things. But it's not necessary right now. It's best to observe first. Of course, you can't observe her in a monotonous and simple comfort zone. You need to push her into a relatively complex environment. My mom is more proactive than you in this regard. We don't blindly believe in Rui Wen at this time. We believe in the ability of this family to protect her. Luo Nan went, oh. Besides, there's still you. Even if there are some problems or accidents, you'll definitely be able to fish her out in time, right? Definitely. Luo Nan still had this sort of confidence. Then it's settled. You don't need to worry about Rui Wen suffering any psychological trauma or the like. A person's character is often warped and expanded under layers upon layers of obstacles. In the end, it is molded. Some people are simply chiseled with knives and axes. From childhood to adulthood, from birth to death, they are all molded and changed. Isn't this an unavoidable process? The process of molding a character isn't a disaster. Even molding a freak isn't counted. Only by completely negating its existence from its roots. That's it. Luo Nan blinked his eyes. Even though it's great reasoning, it sounds pretty good. So please seriously consider whether or not Rui-Wen wants to seize this opportunity to make her debut. It's nothing. What I'm saying is that you can first observe her situation in the school environment when she's not skipping class. Right now Luo Nan was sitting inside gear on the north bank. He was sitting in a leisure booth in the public activity area at the edge of the sandbar waterway. He was speechless for a time. How could he explain the fact that Rui-Wen had blatantly skipped most of her morning classes and was already heading in this direction to meet up with him? Forget it. Luo Nan slapped Jerry's head, who had popped out from who knows where. He decided not to think about this sort of lousy matter this morning. He hung up the phone and drank the fruit juice on the table in 2 or 3 gulps. He asked for another cup for Rui-Wen, preparing to pack it up and take it down to the underground laboratory. This little girl shouldn't like to be in front of people? Luo Nan was absent-minded for a moment. Was this shouldn't what he was thinking? No matter what, he shouldn't verify this matter for the time being. Brother. Nan. Someone suddenly greeted him. When he said, brother, he was clearly a bit restrained. This was mainly because he was in front of people. Luo Nan actually greeted Senior Tian in a very natural manner. The person who came was Tian Chi of Acumen College's Advanced Teaching Department. He was also Senior Tian Ci's cousin, and he was older than Luo Nan by 3 to 4 years. He called Luo Nan brother, in his heart. After all, he was a child who had been beaten up by the reality of society. He just couldn't wipe his face off in front of people. However, Tian Chi's gaze followed the illumination lights and cast into the bottom of the lake. He saw the enormous devil ray swimming lazily in the deep waters, and his greeting became even more sincere. Brother Nan, it's been a while since I've seen you in the society. I heard you took a leave of absence from school? Yeah. I've been running around a bit more lately. Even when I come, I usually go to the laboratory. I understand. Tian Chi's gaze unconsciously glanced at the devil ray at the bottom of the lake. Actually, many people in the Mystic Arts Research Society knew that this dangerous mutant that had been tamed disappeared for a period of time last month. It only returned at the beginning of this month. There were even fewer people who knew that the main character of the video of the devil ray flying through the sky that had been wildly popular in Xia City at the beginning of last month was probably the devil ray at the bottom of the lake. As for the highly blurry figure in the video, forget it. He didn't dare to think about it. Though he didn't dare to think about it too deeply, Tian Chi still unconsciously moved closer when he saw Luo Nan. It was good to say a few words. Luo Nan's polite attitude made his nervous state of mind ease a bit. Right when he wanted to chat a bit more, he saw Luo Nan wave his hand behind him. The fat-headed and big-eared Jerry had leaped out a bit earlier than Luo Nan. Tian Chi turned his head and saw Rui-Wen appear at the entrance of the public activity area. She was wearing the standard summer dress of Acumen College. Jerry rushed directly to Rui-Wen's feet. He wanted to move closer, but he was a bit afraid. He just circled around her feet. Rui-Wen had to bend over to pick Jerry up and bring him over. It was quite eye-catching to see a middle and low-grade student appear here during class time. The lively muskrat that moved closer intensified this impression. However, Rui-Wen's face was even more eye-catching. They could faintly hear someone exclaim in surprise over at the public activity area, "Hold on. This is the Demon Eye woman, right? Short hair, black eyes, fair skin, and a beautiful appearance. She looks like, especially that skin. She's from our school?" The students of Acumen College possessed the most basic qualities. They suppressed their voices when they exclaimed in surprise. But there weren't many people here to begin with. The corner of the bar was relatively quiet, so the sounds of exclamations and whispers were particularly clear. Luo Nan and Rui Wen obviously heard them loud and clear. Luo Nan looked over there and saw that Rui Wen's jade porcelain-like face didn't fluctuate at all. She was completely unaware that she had become the center of everyone's gazes. Tianqi also heard them. He knew of this fact earlier than the vast majority of the people here, even though he and Rui Wen had only met a few times. He grinned and took advantage of the fact that Rui Wen hadn't come over yet to come closer. He whispered, "There are quite a few people who are crazy about Rui Wen in the society. It seems like some people have already guessed it. I heard that OK has already gotten someone to inquire about Rui Wen's contact information." OK? Oh, it's that vice president. Luo Nan's impression was that he seemed to be a rather pretentious young man. As for Rui Wen's identity being leaked, it wasn't strange. After all, this little girl was a frequent customer of the Mystic Arts Research Society. Her appearance and temperament were especially outstanding. It was very normal for her to leave an impression on others. Luo Nan smiled at Tianqi. "Rui Wen's here. Let's go do an experiment. We'll talk next time." "Sure. You busy yourself." Tianqi was already very content to be able to exchange a few words with Luo Nan. He saw Rui Wen walk over with Jerry in her arms. He stood up and helped her pull out a nearby chair before leaving. However, Rui Wen didn't have any intentions of sitting down. She just looked at Luo Nan. Luo Nan wanted to chat with her some more, but when he saw the little girl's calm and wooden expression, as well as the drinks that were already packed in his hand, he sighed in the end. "Let's go." Luo Nan and Rui Wen didn't do any experiments in Gear's underground laboratory. Instead, they quickly jumped to the cloud world and entered the misty maze. They went to do the on-the-spot investigation they had agreed on last night. Of course, the on-the-spot investigation was impossible. The area that Rui Wen could currently reach was still out of Luo Nan's reach. Rui Wen clearly had her own considerations regarding this point. Within the tree-hole space that Luo Nan had created to carry material matter, Rui Wen brought up the offline mode drawing software. She referred to the previous records and cast her gaze into the area of the sandstorm outside. At the same time, some of the chaotic fragments that whistled through the air displayed a few special trajectories. They gradually took shape and formed into a scale. They were like thousands of ravines in the depths of the shattered wilderness. There was an underground river that meandered and flowed. Chapter 11:16. Wow! Rui Wen's move was very beautiful. Luo Nan knew that Rui Wen had used some sort of method to transfer the sketches stored in her drawing software into the mist maze. This allowed the fragments of her domain to possess activity for a short period of time, becoming the medium for her drawings. This was similar to Luo Nan's previous demonstration using water vapor, but the difficulty was far higher. First of all, a domain fragment was a domain fragment. No matter how fragmented it was, no matter how sealed it was, its essence was still the direct embodiment of a law. Its material structure was countless times more complex than the water vapor that Luo Nan controlled. Regardless of whether it was material energy or soul force interference, the effects of such a carrier would be greatly reduced. Luo Nan had opened up the space of the tree hole within the misty labyrinth from nothing. He was the clearest about the difficulty of this place. Secondly, Luo Nan didn't see Rui Wen operate this set of animations. She displayed the connections and rich details of the tens of thousands of drawings stored in the drawing software in an orderly manner. Yes, Luo Nan didn't see Rui Wen's manual operation when she demonstrated the animation. At the very least, he didn't see the follow-up operation at all. Rui Wen just gave him the initial power, and then all the changes naturally occurred and continued to evolve. It was as if Rui Wen had programmed the fragments of this boundless domain beforehand. As long as a switch was pressed, all the fragments would operate according to the preset rules. Something didn't seem right. Luo Nan faintly felt a bit awkward. He wanted to analyze it more seriously, but the content that Rui Wen displayed attracted his attention at this time. This seems to be... Luo Nan snapped his fingers, and the lens nebula suddenly expanded from a miniaturized state at the very center of the second level of the tree-hole space. It was like a gradually magnified starry sky seen in a lens, revealing more and more details. It was useless to have too many details. Of course, Luo Nan was able to see that Rui Wen's drawing had been simplified to a certain degree. He had scaled the lens nebula to a similar scale, making it a bit more intuitive. Luo Nan made a slight comparison and came to a preliminary conclusion. This radiation zone hasn't been monitored yet, and you're relying on the inner layer. You don't want to live anymore. He unconsciously raised his voice and glared at Rui Wen. You're already listening in, Raven replied. There's no result at all, okay? If you take another step forward, won't you run into this Sunwheel Extreme prison? Do you still want to live? It's still a long way off. Rui Wen's reply was even simpler. Luo Nan pressed her head. Is the concept of near and far appropriate here? Rui Wen remained silent. As long as Luo Nan had the time in the near future, he would certainly go to the tree hole space to conduct an eavesdrop. He would also make the relevant records. He would combine the boundless fragmented data with Rui Wen's search records to slowly trace the outline of the misty maze. He didn't dare to say that he had a complete grasp of it, but he had a general understanding of it. The core of the maze was, of course, the Sunwheel Extreme Hell. It was a place where the two unimaginable forces of order and chaos locked together. It was both violent and balanced. Luo Nan didn't know how far the other side was from him. The concept of near and far wasn't suitable to be used here. All he could sense was the pull and radiation of this powerful existence. It was very likely that what he had been paying attention to all this time was just a projection. The main body was still countless light years away. But it was also possible that he would fall into the fatal gravitational sphere if he took another step into the misty labyrinth. It would be impossible for him to climb out. Luo Nan had consecutively created two world-class events, the light of the polar domain and the daytime nightmare, within half a year. He understood the terror of the Sunwheel Extreme Hell better than anyone else. Therefore, he could only stay a respectful distance away. He even had to intentionally distinguish and avoid the eavesdropping. The remaining areas that could be eavesdropped and traced were the main parts of the lenticular nebula. Basically, they were the perceptible areas that had been contaminated by the local space-time rules of Earth. Luo Nan made a simple division of them. The first type was the radiation zone. It seemed that the two grand forces of the Sunwheel Extreme Hell had collided in opposite directions within these areas. It was unknown how many years had passed since the collision, but the shockwaves were still tenaciously continuing without stopping. Of course, it was more likely that they were affected by the powerful and contradictory radiation of the Sunwheel Extreme Hell, resulting in the continuous impact and collision. They also carried out a complex fusion. It was as if they were verifying the interlocking equilibrium of the Sunwheel Extreme Hell, but they weren't completely successful. This was the main melody of the misty labyrinth. The other type was the safe zone. Luo Nan's Luo clan's sandwich domain, which bore the space of the tree hole, was located in the relatively quiet periphery. These areas were clearly affected by the local space-time of Earth. They were the main forces that collided and formed the cloud world. Currently, they could be considered the underlying structure of the cloud world. Strictly speaking, the distribution of this structure didn't have the concept of up, down, and four directions. The division between the inside and the outside was very blurry. It was highly complex and highly distorted, going against the daily experience of humans. It wasn't even easy to describe. The lenticular nebula only displayed a distorted projection. In essence, it was still a database. A deeper analysis was needed. Luo Nan's daily eavesdropping on the misty labyrinth was like a passive radar. Although the amount of data he processed was large and there was a lot of noise, he was able to avoid making contact with the Sunwheel Extreme Hell. He did the basic work bit by bit. It was solid and safe. He wasn't the only one who was safe. Rui Wen was safe as well. As long as he was effectively eavesdropping, the little girl should be able to come and go freely in the safe zone and even within the range of the eavesdropped on the radiation zone with her ability of body and soul merging. From Luo Nan's perspective, Rui Wen's reconnaissance shouldn't have been done with the mindset of taking risks and searching for treasures. Instead, she should have helped his eavesdropping to carry out verification. Actually, it was precisely Rui Wen that allowed Luo Nan to take many detours. She reduced a large amount of useless work. Luo Nan was able to quickly digest and absorb the results of his father's observations in the past month. If it wasn't for the requirements of the pseudo-plane, damn. In the end, it was still his problem. Luo Nan was vexed. He couldn't help but press a few more times on Rui Wen's head. Things weren't over yet. Rui Wen had run into the radiation zone without effective eavesdropping. Her nature could be called dangerous, but it didn't have much to do with the awkwardness from before. Luo Nan calmed his mind a bit. The animation of Rui Wen's demonstration flashed endlessly in his mind. It corresponded with the area within the lens nebula that he had just begun eavesdropping on not too long ago. It was a familiar yet unfamiliar area. He tossed aside the details that he couldn't delve into and just locked onto the skeleton depicted in Rui Wen's sketch. It was probably a few relatively large fragments of the domain or the fusion of fragments. These large masses of things were manifested on the lens nebula in the form of a fuzzy halo of stars. There were a few slightly bright stars scattered in the center, and under the cover of these stars was the final target that Rui Wen had pointed out. It was just that this final target seemed to be hidden a bit too deep within the current lens nebula. And the location wasn't quite right. Luo Nan suddenly had a guess. He aimed at the area that Rui Wen had displayed. He even wanted to use his hands to measure the star atlas. This wasn't necessary. The eavesdropping and mapping image of the area was the result of his and Rui Wen's hard work. The answer actually lingered in his mind. Using his eyes and his hands was nothing more than confirmation. Yes. Strictly speaking, the image of the radiation zone without effective eavesdropping on the lens nebula was different from the final image of Rui Wen's demonstration. And it wasn't the same as the one at the very front. Luo Nan felt that Rui Wen's drawing skills were immature at first. Her simplification wasn't appropriate enough, resulting in a distortion. But now, let me see those drawings. Rui Wen obviously wouldn't refuse. She immediately brought up the work area and displayed the tens of thousands of drawings in the background. Due to the large amount of data to be processed, the refresh process wasn't too smooth. Luo Nan couldn't care about this. He directly got to work and quickly flipped through the work area, flipping through these drawings from front to back. This could more or less be considered a manual broadcast of an animation. But the broadcast didn't take too long. Soon, the first half of the several thousand drawings arranged in order appeared. If the evolution process displayed by these several thousand drawings was described as a 10-second video, then the one Luo Nan locked onto would be in the region of half a second. Though it had undergone simplification, it highly corresponded with the structure of the star atlas displayed on the lens nebula. There was practically no difference. It seemed that this one was the present. Then, Luo Nan pursed his lips and turned his head to begin controlling the lens nebula. There was no doubt that the structural details of the mist labyrinth were constantly changing. One had to accept this in order to observe it accurately. One had to adapt to this. For this reason, even though the data that constituted the star atlas could be described as a sea of data, both Luo Nan and Luo Zhongheng did their best to preserve the crucial process data. They recorded the instantaneous appearance of every node of the mist labyrinth. Blurry was counted as well. Luo Nan was tracing back to the previous records. He slowly pushed the structure of the mist labyrinth displayed on the star atlas forward. Actually, he was completely capable of retrieving a single photograph. Even if the lens nebula was intrinsically distorted and unreal, the astronomical amount of data was placed there. It would consume quite a bit of mental effort to realize the dynamic changes. But Luo Nan felt that it was very necessary. Thus, after approximately 5 days or so, it was still the same cluster of stars that alternated between light and dark. However, the main skeleton that was constructed from the bright stars, after a slight adjustment of the angle and position, astonishingly formed a nearly perfect correspondence with Rui Wen's initial sketch. Luo Nan also confirmed a step further. This process of tracing back was simply the first half of Rui Wen's demonstration animation, played backwards. Alright, this is the past. Then, the ones that haven't been monitored yet? Are they the future? Luo Nan stopped. His forehead and the back of his head were slightly sweating. One reason was because of the mental effort consumed. The other reason was because he suddenly discovered that his talent and strength towards Ruin, he never understood it from start to finish. Chapter 11:17. Luo Nan had sensed something during Rui Wen's demonstration just now. During the entire process, Rui Wen had only used her initial power from beginning to end. She had pushed the initial sketch, and then everything had operated according to the established procedure. There really hadn't been any other interference in the middle. Luo Nan's awkward feeling stemmed from this. He had misunderstood earlier. Rui Wen hadn't drawn the results of her own observations into images and then demonstrated them. She had merely wanted to display the scene that had just occurred for him to see. To be more precise, there had never been any results of observation. The star atlas formed from the monitoring data corresponded to the nodes of Rui Wen's sketch. The closest set of nodes had just reached the first 2020 of the star atlas. Nothing had happened yet. How could there be any observations? In other words, this was a set of foresight. It foretold the development and evolution of a portion of the radiation region of the Mist Labyrinth in the future. Luo Nan cast his gaze towards the Lens Nebula. He felt the astronomical amount of data corresponding to every instant within. He thought about the amount of computation required for the dissipation and convergence of every detail. He went silent for a time. Of course, this was just a guess. As for whether or not it was true, it was still faster to ask Rui Wen. Rui Wen, is this the result of your predictions? Rui Wen thought for a moment and answered, I see a bit. I see. Luo Nan didn't know how to respond for a time. Rui Wen rarely used rhetorical techniques when she spoke. She usually wouldn't say things like descriptions or comparisons. So, when she said she saw it, she really saw it? It would have been very hard for Luo Nan to think about this a month ago. But during this time, the inconceivable perceptual mode that came from the magnetic optical mica was gradually changing Luo Nan's observation and thought patterns. The appearance of this world was becoming more and more different from what it had always displayed over the past decade. Whether it was living things, inanimate objects, material objects, or the void. Everything revealed a different structure and connection under the bizarre perspective of the magnetic optical mica. Right now Luo Nan was doing his best to adjust and adapt. He hoped that this difference wouldn't turn into a tear. Looking at the normal world was already like this. What Luo Nan saw and felt when he observed the Mist Labyrinth was different from before. It was just that this place was far too chaotic and complex even under the special perspective of the magnetic optical mica. And the amount of data excavated had increased by an order of magnitude. Luo Nan needed to comb it a step further before he could hope to restore it to effective information. Since he was like this, who knew what this world was like in Rui Wen's eyes? Rui Wen was most likely unable to understand the complex train of thought within Luo Nan's mind. Since Luo Nan had asked her, she obviously had to answer to the best of her abilities. Right now, Luo Nan had already brought up the Lens Nebula. Rui Wen gestured at the more intuitive star atlas. There's one here, or maybe two. It's a bit dangerous right now. After a while, it'll be thrown out to this position. If it was someone else listening to Rui Wen's explanation, they would definitely be confused. Luo Nan immediately understood. You're saying that within this area, there are 1 or 2 large-scale domain fragments that will be affected by the collision of the ramming radiation zone. They will be thrown from a relatively deep location to a relatively safe area. They might be more suitable for remodeling? Rui Wen nodded. This was something that the radiation zone was capable of doing. Such a phenomenon seemed a little counterintuitive at first glance. The center of the contradiction or the storm should have a stronger impact, and the remaining debris should also be finer. But the problem was that the mist maze, which was a special environment caused by sunwheel hell, could not be simply regarded as the result of the collision and explosion. What was displayed in the broken structure was a mutual restriction, mutual influence, and mutual distortion mechanism. The next step forward was order. The next step after order was chaos. The present was only a temporary equilibrium. This sort of equilibrium mechanism formed a complex gravitational sphere. It was just like what commonly happened in the boundless universe. All things were destroyed and reconstructed, but they were no longer their original appearances. And this led to a direct result. The closer one got to the danger zone of the gravitational sphere, the more resources one could use. The chances of picking up scraps in the periphery were far, far too low. Luo Nan sighed and rubbed Rui Wen's scalp with force. So you know the danger. It can be used. Rui Wen didn't resist. She just emphasized this point once more. Since you said it, of course I believe you. It was rare for Rui Wen to say such accurate words. Luo Nan really didn't dare to refuse. He was afraid that this little girl would take things too hard and run into the radiation zone, to dig anew. It would be good to take advantage of this opportunity to let her slow down. Since it was decided, Luo Nan subconsciously began to draw up a plan in his mind. According to Rui Wen's demonstration of the transformation process, it would take around 3 months for 1 or 2 large-scale domain fragments to be thrown out. It could be said that time was ample, but it could also be said that he was nervous. First, he needed to conduct a step further of monitoring. He needed to gather more data and verify the trend of transformation that Rui Wen demonstrated. Doing this to the radiation zone would more or less require some risk. It was just that it couldn't be compared to what Rui Wen had experienced. Naturally, he needed to arrive there and make contact with that place. Only then could he truly confirm and carry out the transformation project. But even at the end of Rui Wen's demonstration, the location of the large-scale fragment was at the edge of the radiation zone. This edge wasn't a simple outer region. It was a relatively safe zone within the distorted maze structure. He needed to properly plan his route if he wanted to arrive. This was a very severe challenge. If he failed, he would fall into the radiation zone. He would be pulled by the gravitational sphere, and it was very likely that he would have to face the onslaught of the Sunwheel Hell once more. In other words, I need to make preparations to detonate and endure the daytime nightmare once more. At least once. Luo Nan muttered to himself as he sorted out his thoughts. In this case, he needed to wait until the altar's spiderweb was completely restored for the sake of safety. Only with this safety net could he buffer and precipitate the flood of information that he was unable to digest. Luo Nan even thought that even with this safety net, he couldn't use it too many times. Not to mention the limits of what he could endure, the occasional daytime nightmare could be attributed to a natural phenomenon as much as possible, or it could be concealed by an occasional accident. But if it were to appear at a high frequency, some people would certainly discover some clues. Yes, Luo Nan was referring to the awesome High Lord of Secret Contract, the one who monitored the abyssal region all year round. Of course, there was also Li Wei. If they were to really discover some clues, it would be a great deal of trouble in the future. It's best if I don't do it more than once. Luo Nan raised his standards. Rui Wen didn't quite understand. She turned to look at him. Luo Nan locked gazes with the young girl's deep and pure eyes. He subconsciously exerted force to rub her head. Rui Wen didn't say a word, allowing him to rub her head. It must be said that Rui Wen's talent had already reached a level that defied common sense. Though talent itself was a certain distance away from common sense, no matter how strong it was, it still needed to conform to basic laws, right? When a certain ability far exceeded the scope of a race's inheritance, far exceeded the prior perceptual regulations of a race. Even if it was a difference of 1 or more dimensions, it wouldn't be as simple as a folktale like the opening of Heaven's Eye. Sometimes, the fantasies of humans far exceeded the regulations of reality. But when these fantasies truly materialized and appeared before the eyes of people, she really was like a humanoid fantasy breed. This thought. It was too excessive. Luo Nan quickly rubbed Rui Wen's head twice, and the young girl tilted her head a bit doubtfully. Luo Nan increased his strength and revealed a smile to the young girl. But at this moment, he couldn't avoid letting go of his thoughts. Was Rui Wen's ability really a talent that belonged to humans? If it was, where was the foundation? If it wasn't, where did it come from? Well, Luo Nan could roughly guess a bit. After leaving the misty maze, Luo Nan let Rui Wen return to class. He quickly dialed a number. Mr. Blood Demon, I want to ask you about something. Right now, Blood Demon was already a key figure in Luo Nan's communication with the Eye of Secret Deeds and the Starry Sky Club. This person was deeply involved in the follow-up global census project. Everyone was already very familiar with each other, so Luo Nan bluntly asked, "How much do you know about Li Wei's Apocalypse Laboratory and the Bloodline Project? Why did you suddenly think of asking about this?" The blood demon chuckled. It was obvious that he was adjusting his mind. "Aren't you preparing for the global census? Speaking of which, I've been waiting for you here in Ha City for quite some time. It's a mess over here." Luo Nan was a bit dissatisfied with Blood Demon's vague attitude. He responded, "Can I investigate the Bloodline Project in Ha City?" "Oh, what rumors did you hear?" Blood Demon's tone tightened a bit, becoming much more solemn. It seemed like there was a mistake. Luo Nan's mind stirred slightly, and his words became a bit vague. "There weren't any rumors. I'm just interested in a few special talents." Blood Demon responded with a question. "Which one of us isn't a special talent?" Luo Nan responded calmly, "The kind that far surpasses the level of human life? In any case, it's not me." Blood Demon laughed heartily as if he had heard the most absurd joke in the world. Okay. I have a general idea of what's going on. As for the Apocalypse Laboratory, to be honest, I've researched and understood them before, but I'm basically at the level of hearing wind and rain. There's no harm in asking more questions. Combining the opinions from all sides will never deviate too much from the truth. That's not necessarily true. The Apocalypse Laboratory is different from the Deep Blue Laboratory. The Apocalypse Laboratory is Li Wei's old foundation. It's a treasure. What's released right now might all be interference bullets. The Bloodline Project is also interference bullets? That depends on what kind of Bloodline Project you're talking about. Blood Demon listed them one by one. Is it a project to restore the youth of those old fellows whose necks are buried in the soil? Or is it a project to help humans unlock the genetic lock and make breakthroughs on the path of evolution? Or is it the legendary perfect template that can be used as a reference? Luo Nan thought for a moment. I feel like our tastes are about the same. Which one are you most interested in? Oh my, I'm really overwhelmed by the favor. Blood Demon was laughing and laughing on the surface, slippery and slippery, but he was very cooperative when it came to this. If it were me, I would obviously be more interested in the perfect template. Luo Nan muttered to himself. I remember Black Lion saying that the Bloodline Project is conducted with reference to the perfect template for research. Don't blame me for biting off more than I can chew. The connotation and extension of the word perfect is enormous. Blood Demon interrupted Luo Nan's words. What level is perfect? A perfect person lives for over 100 years, never escaping from birth, old age, sickness, and death. A perfect God. That's a level that our imaginations can't reach. Someone came up with this kind of name. He's up to no good. Luo Nan frowned. The main point of your words is. The main point is still the name. Blood Demon chuckled. Don't you want to confirm this? Chapter 11:18. No, I just wanted to ask about Ruewen. But now you've changed the topic. Luo Nan wasn't sure if Blood Demon had truly misunderstood, or if it was intentional. At a time like this, listening more and talking less was correct, but it was hard to understand without a head or tail. Luo Nan added vaguely, you can help me sort out the clues. Blood Demon gladly agreed. There are some things I need to ponder over. The Deep Blue Project has been in development for less than a decade. The related products come one generation after another. The military's similar self-research projects are suppressed to the point where they can't lift their heads. The Bloodline Project was established a generation earlier than Deep Blue. Not a single reliable rumor has leaked out, but there are still people madly pouring money into it. As far as I know, similar projects that are unrelated to the Apocalypse Laboratory have received less and less sponsorship in recent years, especially the funding from the top circles of the rich and powerful. Oh my, it's truly a tragic sight. What does this mean? It means that your investment has failed. Luo Nan responded in his mind for the first time, but he remained silent in reality. The Blood Demon didn't have the ability of telepathy. He continued, Is it because those rich people who have buried their necks in the soil are staking it all on one throw? Do they trust Li Wei that much? Do they trust this highly dangerous fellow of unknown origin? I can believe that one person is retarded, but all of them are retarded. It's better to believe that Li Wei has cast a collective curse on them. Luonen felt that Blood Demon could be a bit more direct. So, brother, you need to know that Li Wei is a fellow who is very good at persuading people. He is the expert who knows how to fight for research funding. He's on a completely different level than those great hoodwinkers who are used to using PowerPoint to tell stories. He's much better at using facts. At the very least, the salivating prospects that are based on a partial truth to convince people. The Li Wei that Blood Demon spoke of sounded more like the boss of a school. Luo Nan's lips twitched. So, the results of the Bloodline Project have already been placed before those people's eyes. They have obtained approval. Yes, they should have achieved extraordinary success. Luo Nan's mind suddenly stirred when he said the word, extraordinary. A few faintly discernible figures quickly flashed through his mind, but his mouth didn't pause. If you want to prove your success, you have to do it in a circle that's neither too big nor too small. Success itself needs some fame, but you have to do it discreetly. Most of the time, you have to change your appearance. It's still success, but what they think of as success is different from what we think of as success. In the end, the Bloodline Project is a project to study people. Its most convincing results are also people, such as Ruwen. Luo Nan's understanding of the Bloodline Project suddenly deepened by a level as he thought back to the matter of the 2000th young miss. That was how it was strung together. No wonder the Blood Demon kept mentioning names after he suspected that there was a misunderstanding. It was true that only the names that were deeply related to the Bloodline Project could prove the real value of the Bloodline Project. If he added the keywords that caused the Blood Demon's misunderstanding, Ha City, which famous person in Ha City? Forgive Luo Nan for his shallow knowledge, but he only knew of one person. Apollyon. The one who was publicly acknowledged as one of the 16 strongest extraordinaries, the one who dominated the new continent, and the one who formed a restrictive contract with the High Lord of the Secret Contract, was actually related to the Bloodline Project? In that case, what was the purpose of High Lord's Secret Contract's challenge? The background behind the scenes was much more complicated than what he knew. Luonen couldn't figure it out for a time. Naturally, he had to ask again. But there was no need to mention Apollyon's name at this time. The main thing was that he could feel that the name Blood Demon spoke of was not singular, but plural. So he might as well speak a bit more openly. Mr. Blood Demon, I'll ask you this. There are less than 100 extraordinaries standing at the apex of the world right now. How many of them are related to the Bloodline Project? Or perhaps they were released by the Apocalypse Laboratory? These words lingered in Luo Nan's chest. Luo Nan's mind was truly awed when he actually said them. Li Wei's influence on Earth had already reached such a deep level? It was probably because Blood Demon had long since made up his mind. Luo Nan just laughed out loud when he pointed it out. From what I'm saying, anyone who is close to the Apocalypse Laboratory and Li Wei is a suspect. There's no need to talk about Wang Yong that day on the ship. It's possible that Tu Gu. Thousands of miles away, Luo Nan shook his head slightly when Blood Demon spoke of Tu Gu. But he didn't interrupt Blood Demon's words. Luo Nan continued to listen. A bit more extreme. After Li Wei took control of the Deep Blue World and established the Apocalypse Laboratory, any extraordinaries who are close to him are suspects. After all, the extraordinaries have only appeared for 30 years or so from the time they have grown to their current scale. It's not a short time, but it's far too fast when it comes to the level of human evolution. It's so fast that it feels unreal. It would be a bit easier for me to accept if someone was manipulating things from behind. This sort of thinking was really hard to accept, right? Especially when you're an extraordinary. Luo Nan's eyebrows jumped. This fellow Blood Demon seemed to have a carefree and uninhibited appearance, but his mind was unexpectedly a bit dark. You're quite confident in Li Wei. I just hope that you can take things a step further before you go to Ha City. After all, the entire world knows that you're competing with Li Wei. You can't not understand the weight on the other side before you go to the boxing stage, right? Blood Demon spoke in a candid manner. We can be considered to be on the same side right now. I have to do a bit of a reminder. A reminder that Li Wei's energy is beyond imagination? Luo Nan grew more and more suspicious that Blood Demon's misunderstanding today was intentional. This fellow seemed to have been waiting for such an opportunity. Blood Demon chuckled. Speaking of energy, I've thought of another example. You should know that the situation here isn't too good. Though Luo Nan resided in Xia City, he was constantly paying attention to Ha City, the center of the storm of the mutant infection outbreak. He was even secretly drawing portraits of the large quantities of mutant-infected people in the city, establishing a model for the step selection of Phase 2 infected people. Plus, he had gathered all sorts of news and intelligence reports. His understanding of Ha City was no less than anyone else's. You understand the situation of Phase 2 and Phase 3 as well? It's very troublesome. Luo Nan responded simply. He searched for 2 more keywords: riots, lack of food. Lack of food. Blood Demon chuckled. In modern society, words like lack of food, or the more serious term, famine, seem to be extremely far away. But in Ha City right now, these words went from pure concepts to gradually becoming reality. Due to the mutant infection being completely out of control, the number of infected people in Ha City increased explosively. There were also large amounts of highly dangerous people who were transforming from Phase 2 to Phase 3. The mutant process of these people was already irreversible. Their primordial genes had collapsed and mutated. They were rapidly transforming in the direction of mutant species. This transformation process was extremely fast, and it involved a mutation on the fleshly plane. It was necessary to absorb large amounts of squandered energy in a short period of time. Such an energy requirement was destined to be impossible to satisfy with 3 normal meals a day. Therefore, the infected in this stage would transform into the craziest of predators. Under the drive of chaotic and manic emotions, they would seize all resources that they could use. Things that could be edible and digestible were included, from ordinary food to other fleshly creatures, including people. In a normal city, the appearance of 1 or 2 infected people like this could lead to a series of bloody cases. And in today's Ha City, there were far more than 1 or 200 or even 1 or 2,000 infected people. Thus, riots, massacres, and even famines emerged as the times required. Mutant conversion was an inefficient energy intake method that relied on probability. It would inevitably lead to a large amount of waste. In addition to the influence of social unrest, Ha City's basic mode of existence as a modern metropolis had nearly completely collapsed. Luo Nan was recalling and also monitoring Ha City's situation in real time. If Ha City continues to be in this state, the aid will not be able to keep up. It will be hard to avoid a great famine. However, the current situation is more of a temporary phenomenon caused by accidents, right? There was no need for secret intelligence. Right now, a few conservative news channels were reporting over and over again. Ha City's largest cultivation buildings had caught fire and exploded due to the effects of the riots. The energy supply lines were destroyed, and a considerable portion of the food that was about to be harvested and sold on the market was destroyed. This caused the price of food in the city to skyrocket. The citizens were panic-stricken and panic-stricken. Bread was hard to find. Let's not discuss lack of food or famine today. Blood Demon chuckled twice. The example I'm looking for is actually the cultivation buildings. You know that the cultivation buildings were one of the most important foundational supports for several dozen large metropolises to be built after World War III. Right now, the world's population of 10 billion has already recovered to the level it was before World War III. The population of 10 billion before World War III was basically the limit that the world could bear. After World War III, the world's arable land area exploded from 17 million square kilometers to 1.7 million square kilometers. Under these circumstances, the world was able to support the same number of people even though it had shrunk by 90%. That's right. Luo Nan knew this knowledge since he was in elementary school. The cultivation buildings were undoubtedly the crystallization of the world's agricultural, chemical, and energy technologies that advanced by leaps and bounds. It was also a necessary test point for geography or biology tests. Blood Demon suddenly asked, "What is the essence of the cultivation buildings?" Luo Nan answered without hesitation, "Energy in exchange for output." "Where does energy come from?" "Fusion reactors." "Where does fusion reactors come from?" "From..." Luo Nan was suddenly stuck. He didn't continue for a time. Blood Demon continued to ask him, unwilling to let him go. "Where does fusion reactors come from? Who holds the technology patents? Why is it that before World War III, the practical application of fusion reactors was always 50 years later? Why did this technology suddenly mature after the war when everything was in ruins? It went from practical application to miniaturization in one go?" Luo Nen couldn't answer. Blood Demon still didn't give up. At present, fusion reactors still use magnetic confinement fusion technology. Room temperature superconductors must be used to form an ultra-strong magnetic field. Where does this special, cutting-edge material come from? Luo Nen asked, knowing the answer. Blood Demon's answer was nothing new. Deep Blue World. Li Wei sighed. Chapter 11:19. This time, Luo Nen just chuckled twice. Blood Demon gave him a few words of explanation. The Deep Blue World has a special mineral deposit that doesn't exist on Earth. The Apocalypse Laboratory calls it progenitor. Its specific properties aren't too clear, but it's said to be a half-energized marvel. It's extremely difficult to harvest. Some intelligence says that it's impossible to do with the current level of technology. Of course, it's hard to say whether or not Li Wei can succeed. Progenitor? Is it the type that the Deep Blue Walkers use as fuel for their backup energy system? Luo Nan had done in-depth research on the Deep Blue platform. He immediately flipped through the relevant information in his mind. That's progenitor with low purity. To be precise, it's just the impurities of or that have received the energy radiation of progenitor. It's formed through special purification techniques. It can barely be considered a companion or... No, it really can't be considered a companion or... The true companion or is none other than the super strong magnetic field that wraps the progenitor or within the ghost stone. This is the origin of the superconducting revolution after World War III. The electrical signal that carried Blood Demon's explanation was transformed into sound waves that entered Luo Nan's ears. It stirred, causing him to let out an extremely faint sigh. The superconducting revolution. Another pillar of the modern metropolis, the transportation and energy supply network that was like the blood vessels of the human body, as well as the countless basic materials and technical fields, were actually engraved with Li Wei's imprint from the very roots. Li Wei was truly a boss-type fellow. And this was just the part that he had shown to the people. Many people, including Blood Demon, should be able to guess that the core that supported this powerful power far surpassed the level that Earth's current civilization should be able to display. But so far, Luo Nan had not seen any particularly obvious or decisive evidence, be it from the mouth of the Blood Demon or from the information he had obtained from his own understanding. If given the chance, there would probably be quite a few people in the world who would grab Luo Nan by the collar and interrogate him. Where in the world did you copy that configuration and superconfiguration theory from? But Li Wei didn't seem to know where to start even if they were to interrogate him. In this regard, he seemed to be a bit more low-key than Luo Nan. Frankly speaking, this was because of Li Wei's deep foundation on Earth. It was incomparable. This demon from beyond could not be viewed as a simple isolated individual. It was just like in an RPG game. Before seeing the final boss, one would have to struggle through endless levels for a while. Luo Nan thought for a few seconds. Then he thought about it and finally chuckled, "Okay, I get it. Thanks for telling me. Let's talk in detail when we meet later." After thinking about it for a while, he finally chuckled and said, "All right, I understand. Thank you for telling me. Let's talk in detail when we meet again." Blood Demon replied, "Sure. We'll talk in detail when we meet." The call ended, and Luo Nan could not help but think a few more things. Li Wei had such a common and close relationship with the extraordinaries of the world. What about the blood demon? Blood demon demon Luo demon demon blood demon. Luo Nan actually didn't feel anything strange at all. He shook his head slightly and strolled through the underground laboratory. This position was merely a few walls away from the independent power station that supplied energy to the entire North Bank gear. With Luo Nan's perceptual acuity, he was even able to clearly hear the humming roar of the operation of the energy furnace. Luo Nan's thoughts drifted a bit when he heard this voice. He still remembered that he had borrowed the power station's reserve energy to discover some of the secrets of the external neuron. Now that he thought about it, there were many details that could be explored. In today's world, all technological devices, at least intelligent electrical devices, had no resistance against the external neuron. Well, it should be said that the Dynamo Core products that Luo Nan had seen were in a nearly defenseless state. At first, Luo Nan treated it as an extraterrestrial higher-level civilization crushing a lower-level civilization. But as he continued to study and research, especially after the experience at the relay station, he gained a deeper understanding of Dynamo Core technology. All sorts of functions that came from the unknown returned to the plane of reality. Some functional domains of Dynamo Core technology were more mystical than what Luo Nan imagined. But some of them still had inherent limitations. They had to conform to basic laws no matter what. For example, the control of electrical devices. If the two structures were completely different, even the lowest level of information coding was different, what control was there to talk about? The reason why Dynamo Core products were able to do this was because there was no difference in the lowest level. Instead, there was a high degree of convergence. The Dynamo Core technology that came from the depths of the distant starry sky was completely compatible with the information technology of Earth. Weren't there too many coincidences in the universe? Luo Nan was more convinced that there was a long and deep fusion going on inside than this kind of imagination. Moreover, the weak side was leaning towards the strong side. It was truly meticulous. Luo Nan had already walked out of the North Shore jungle while his thoughts were floating. He arrived at the empty campus. Since it was class time, there were very few people on the large campus of Acumen College. The few people he saw were all in a hurry. Most of the students and teachers were arranged according to their classes. They were arranged into classrooms of various sizes. The school had its own rules and regulations to restrict them. Luo Nan, who had already entered a state of suspension, was a complete anomaly at this time. Of course, there were tens of thousands of students and even teachers in the school. There were many who were impatient with the restrictions of the past. They skipped classes, asked for leave, and were absent from work. Even though some people were in the classroom, their minds were wandering. Some people could even see Luo Nan strolling leisurely on the campus through the windows. It was unknown how envious they were in their hearts. Of course, they were merely envious of Luo Nan's freedom. If these people were to know what sort of price they would have to pay in order to have Luo Nan's current treatment, what sort of pressure they would have to endure, or perhaps they would be restricted by a completely new and unknown set of rules, the vast majority of them would immediately extinguish the thoughts in their hearts. After all, if you had to completely change your current lifestyle habits, even if you had to bet your future as the price, most people would feel that there was nothing wrong with the present. This was habit and order. Luo Nan absolutely did not dislike order. He even had a relatively strong inclination towards order. But once he clearly identified the layer of darkness that covered the skeleton that supported this layer of order on the surface, the inner marrow that quietly grew within it, and the genes and cells that were rooted upon it, a heavy pressure spontaneously arose from the bottom of his heart. Vaguely, this pressure seemed to transform into a dense demonic shadow that silently pressed against the back of his head. It could break his flesh and scrape his bones at any time to deal a fatal blow. At this time, the so-called order was quite hateful. Luo Nan rubbed the back of his head and muttered to himself. In order to maintain the entropy decrease within a system, there must be a channel to handle the entropy increase. That channel. Where is the sewage pipe that conforms to the relevant magnitude? If he wanted to subvert this order, where should he start? June 16, 2097. The third Sunday of June. Influenced by a certain powerful civilization before the Third World War, it was also known as Father's Day. It was basically one of the world's commemorative days of consumerism. This morning, Luo Nan's family finally broke free from the demonic claws woven by Mrs. Luo Shuqing and the home AI, Old Mo. After working overtime for many days, Uncle Mo Haiheng finally had the time to rest. He personally cooked a sumptuous and delicious breakfast for everyone. And today, the entire family was gathered together. Even that idiot Mo Peng actually crawled out of bed before lunch on the weekend. The 6 of them surrounded the table. They weren't pressed by the time of work or school. They spoke one after another, chatting as they ate. They were quite amused. Right now, the main topic at the dining table was Ruiwen. Mo Peng gulped down his breakfast in a few gulps and concentrated on gossiping. Last night, someone posted a practice video. Ruiwen didn't participate in the video, but what's the meaning of her repeatedly appearing in the camera? Ruiwen was talking about Ruiwen, but Mo Peng's eyes shot a glance at Mo Ya. Mingtang culture is simply leaking air from all sides. Even I wouldn't go to this extent. Is there an end to this hype? Ruiwen didn't respond at all. She just ate in small bites. She looked quiet and delicate, but it also seemed like she was tasting the fresh fragrance of each mouthful of porridge soup. It was unknown what these ordinary foods looked like in the end from the level of her perception. Luo Nan looked at Ruiwen for a long time. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and rub her head. At this time, Mo Ya leisurely picked up a sesame pancake and tore it open. Since you know it's hype, why are you still wasting time? Can't I pay attention to a beauty? Mo Peng spoke boldly and confidently, but as a result, he was met with a cold glare from Mrs. Luo Shuqing. His momentum immediately fell to the ground and he laughed. I just think you guys are going too far. There are already people in our class who are betting on whether or not Ruiwen will make her debut. I heard that there are people on the internet who are starting a fan club. If this goes on, it won't be easy to clean up the mess. Mo Ya was like Ruiwen. She ate the pancake in small bites. It was just that she was the one who made it. She ate the staple food like it was a snack. It won't be easy to clean up the mess. It's convenient for you to earn money. You can have Ruiwen sign it and sell it outside. No, absolutely not. Mo Peng received the unfathomable gazes of his parents at the same time. He nearly peed his pants in fright. He immediately raised his hand and cried out in injustice. I used it myself. I just wanted to ride on the popularity and draw some attention online. I wanted to gain a few more fans. Really? Mrs. Luo Shuqing's expression remained unfriendly. Mo Haiheng dismissed it with a laugh. His gaze turned to Mo Ya. Your company has gone a bit overboard these past 2 days. At first, it could be said that they were protecting him, but now that we've seen the results, they're still unwilling to stop. Who knows what kind of trouble they'll cause in the future? If it's not convenient for you to tell me, I'll talk to them. Mo Ya shrugged. What's so inconvenient about it? They've obviously been blinded by the heat these past 2 days. Speaking up to this point, Mo Ya asked, the demonstration hasn't stopped until now. Does the government have any sincerity? Don't let those old matters cause problems in the end before the mutation infection is messed up. Mo Haiheng shook his head. It's not easy to go through the files. He played the same old trick, casually changing the topic. He looked at Luo Nan. You're going out today? Luo Nan grinned. Yeah, I came back before dinner. Chapter 11:20. Not long after Luo Nan vaguely reported his itinerary, an overseas call came in. It was his former secretary, In Lu. She was currently the vice chairman of the Luo Nan and his Friends Foundation. She was in charge of the foundation's daily work. Luo Nan took advantage of this opportunity to leave. Mister, your itinerary remains the same today? Yes, I'll be leaving right away. Luo Nan turned around and waved to his family. He went upstairs to change his clothes. Mrs. Luo Shuqing confirmed from behind, Are you eating at home tonight? Luo Nan responded casually. In Lu spoke at this time. Mister, are you going by yourself? Luo Nan returned to his room. He adjusted his clothes as he spoke. Of course I'm going by myself. It's the most convenient. Inla had already called him last night. The reason why she was so concerned was because she was the one who provided the coordinates for Luo Nan's destination today. It was an abandoned laboratory located northwest of Spring City at the southern end of the Hengduan Mountains. It was also the place where Luo Nan's mother, Mrs. Bo Qingwen, had died. Luo Nan wished to go there to offer his sacrifice. This was something he had desired ever since he could remember, but he was unable to do so. Today was Luo Nan's birthday, and it was also the anniversary of Bo Qingwen's death. He wouldn't delay any longer no matter what. It's like this, mister. Inla did her best to sense Luo Nan's emotions. She spoke carefully. I reported to you that I found an informant when I confirmed the coordinates. He worked in the laboratory back then. Today, he found me and said that someone hired him to lead the way to the laboratory ruins. It seemed to be for the sake of offering his sacrifice. He asked me if I was one of them. Luo Nan furrowed his brows. Who's the employer? He's not too sure. He said it was arranged by the boss. Inla paused for a moment. Seeing that Luo Nan didn't immediately ask for details, she explained softly, it's been half a year since the end of last year until now. Several groups of people have confirmed the location of the laboratory ruins through him. Right now, the pattern has already been set. I know. It's my problem. Luo Nan had long understood this point. It was nothing more than his radiance during this period of time. People coveted him, wanting to trace back to the source and obtain some benefits. After the series of events with Snake Tongue and Jean Tong, these people didn't dare to come to Xia City. Otherwise, places like the North Bank Gear and the Tree Hole Space would have been sieved several times. They couldn't come to Xia City, so some of them went to the wilderness to search for traces of the Luo family's laboratory. The exposure of the Luo cult and the 70-format laboratory back then might have had a lot to do with Luo Nan. Right now, both sides had Luo Nan's telepathic lock onto them, and there were people searching elsewhere. They searched, and they found this place. Luo Nan laughed and didn't mention it again. He looked at himself in the mirror and went downstairs. He asked Inlu, is there anything else? Indeed, there were. Inlu became more careful with her words. The Foundation will send employees to various places and establish offices. Some cities need to submit information, especially the census plan. They can only proceed to the next step after the review. Luo Nan laughed. Ha City and Shi City are in such a mess. Do you want them? It just so happened that he was walking to the staircase on the first floor. When he heard the keywords Ha City and Shi City, everyone in the family, including Madame Luo Shuqing, looked over. They looked at Luo Nan's side, white on the inside and black on the outside. His clothes were concise and solemn. They were a bit stunned. Luo Nan waved his hand at them and quickly left through the living room. Their attitude is very firm. Inlu replied in a low voice. The voices of support are very loud. This matter involved the operation of the Luo Nan and his friends' foundation, as well as the direction of the future global census. Luo Nan had already set the tone on this point. If they wanted to do a census, they would start with Ha City and Shi City, where the contradictions were the sharpest and the most chaotic. It seemed like the contradictions were sharp, but it was actually easier to fish in troubled waters. They could even blur the focus when necessary. But to do all this, they needed the full support of the city administrators. Of course, the most important ones were Apollon and Batguru. Putting the latter aside, no matter how difficult it was to deal with Apollon, he had the eye of the secret contract to mediate in the middle. There shouldn't be any major problems. But Luo Nan had communicated with Blood Demon last time. He had to pay attention to the subtle relationship between Apollon, the Apocalypse Laboratory, and Li Wei. But before Luo Nan could pay attention, a demonic moth appeared on the other side. The census plan and a series of information could be coarse or fine. The audit could be lenient or strict. This was a common method used by the administration to control people. They didn't need to control people. They could grasp the progress through the plan and understand the substantial progress of the global census. If Ha City and Shi City were like this, then the 86 cities would follow suit. The Foundation wouldn't need to do any work in the future. Luo Nan wasn't angry when he encountered this matter. From his perspective, It was much better for Ha City to send a demonic moth this early than for the Foundation to toss and turn after it had fully started its work. On the contrary, it had the effect of a warning. Besides, who would really count on the Foundation to do a census? If the spearhead were to be pointed over there, it could be considered as helping to cover up. Thinking about it this way, Luonen felt that there was a tacit understanding between him and Apollon. Do as they ask. There's no need to be anxious. Also, there's something else. It's about Miss Ruewen. Luonan was already strolling along the community road. He subconsciously turned his head when he heard Ruewen. He felt that Ruewen could hear the sound coming from across the ocean. Inla didn't know Luonan's reaction. She just said, Mingtang culture's face was vague in this matter. They did a bunch of stupid things. It's because of my improper management. Mingtang culture was indeed a company invested in by the Castle Financial Group. Inla had taken the initiative to communicate and apologize. But Luonan didn't really care about this. In fact, with the current situation, the first one to be ambiguous was himself. This was because Luonan really didn't understand the abnormal attention and concern Ruewen displayed in this public matter. It was hard to make a conclusion on what kind of problem it was. Perhaps this was an opportunity? It could enrich Ruewen's overly monotonous life and help this little girl perfect her basic thinking circuits. It wasn't a bad thing. Of course, this couldn't be built on the foundation of psychological harm. The problem was, could this degree of disturbance really harm Ruewen? Luonan didn't feel that this was a possibility for now. Aside from this, Luonan had an independent train of thought. It was just that it wasn't clear and mature enough. It was still faintly discernible. He needed to sort it out a bit more. Mingtang culture doesn't matter. Let's wait a bit more. Let's see what happens next. Yes. Inla was most likely more concerned about whether or not Luonan would get angry. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw him play it down. But there were some words that needed to be said. The upper echelons of Mingtang culture are mostly mediocre people. They aren't suited to have too much autonomy in this matter. If you don't mind, sir, you can use this opportunity to transfer a portion of the shares and the corresponding decision-making power. This will lower the risk to a minimum. Luonan slowly walked out of the community and arrived at the outer road. What do you mean? Inlu spoke of the scheme in her mind. Miss Emoya is an insider and she's also your closest family member. She can hold at least a portion of the shares and have the right to speak on Mingtang culture's internal decisions. Emoya? I'm afraid she doesn't have the patience. Mr. Emo and Ms. Luo can do it as well. Okay, I'll go talk to them later. Ian Lee's words made it seem like the Castle Financial Group was giving away shares to her. It involved a huge wealth of millions. But it really wasn't much compared to Luonan's close relationship with the Blood Flame Order. The two didn't take this matter too seriously. Inlo only needed to know that Luonan wouldn't refuse. She didn't need to worry about the follow-up. But this didn't mean that Ian Lee's matter was over. She used this opportunity to report to the Blood Flame Order. She followed Luonan's instructions to simulate the progress of the Hellfire Tyrant. Luonan actually had a deeper understanding of this than Inlu. Inlu just used this as a primer to lead to another matter. Recently, the madam has been studying the simulation while she's been in closed-door training. She has some insights and wants to share them with you, huh? Luonan raised his eyebrows. Inlu, who was tens of thousands of kilometers away, couldn't follow up with this one sound. This made Luonan understand that Inlu knew that her words were taboo. Ultimately, the connection between Luonan and Madame Halder was deeper than Ian Lee's. It was just like how Luonan's understanding of the structure of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was deeper than everyone in the Blood Flame Order put together. She didn't use the direct route but instead used Ian Lu to deliver the message. She deliberately drifted around. What was she planning? Luonan didn't quite understand. He didn't understand and Ian Lu didn't understand either. She only had some guesses. And the more she guessed, the more guilty she felt. So she became more and more cautious around Luonan. Most of the things she said before were probably because she sensed Luonan's mood. She was afraid that she would bump into the muzzle of a gun. Luonan really didn't care about these little thoughts. She was actually willing to speak up for her old master. This courage was quite commendable. Was there a difference between the old and the new? Luonan felt a bit amused by his own subtle thoughts. He was already walking on the street right now, far away from the residential community. It was a weekend morning, and the flow of people was much less than usual. The streets were empty, but he felt the sea breeze, slowly dispelling the dry air of early summer. Continue speaking. Ian Lee's voice grew weaker and weaker. Sir, the madam's meaning is that you just so happen to be going to Spring City? Yes, Spring City. Luonan turned his head and looked at the silhouette of the rising sun behind the scale-like clouds behind the tall buildings. He slightly narrowed his eyes and waited for the sun to shift in the clouds. The brightness and obscurity changed. Finally, rays of light filled the void and streaked through the gaps between the buildings. They shone on his body, and his skeleton suddenly turned transparent. He disappeared without a trace in the blind spots of pedestrians and surveillance cameras. But in the next second, all the electrical equipment in the surrounding 100-meter diameter area suddenly short-circuited. The streets soon turned into a chaotic mess. Luonan felt a bit of what he had created, but he had no way to do it for the time being. He lifted his hand and moved his fleshly body. The distance was quite far, and he didn't have the anchor point of the horned demon last time. It was hard to avoid a bit of power leaking out. The smoke and fire were a bit heavy, and it was hard to avoid President Ouyang's reprimand. Luonan just turned his head again. He used the position and height of the sun to confirm his current location in the cracked, deathly stillness of the wasteland. At the same time, he spoke to Inlu, who had just reconnected with the communication. It's a bit remote. I'll go look for her when I'm done. Chapter 11:21. Luonan hung up, and his gaze shifted from the sun to the vast and sparse cloud layer. He continued to ponder. How did it deviate? It was quite far off. The distance between him and his destination was nearly 300 kilometers. Right now, he was a bit closer to the satellite city outside of Spring City. Though Luonan had intentionally made adjustments to avoid the impact of crossing space and directly colliding with the laboratory ruins, the error was so large that he had no choice but to ponder over it. In his field of vision, the appearance of the sun or the clouds was different from that of an ordinary person. It could be said that it had already broken the scope of common sense that had been transmitted in an orderly fashion over several thousand years of civilization. It had merged into the extremely complex structure of space and time. At this time, the magnetic optical mica was extending its enormous body that seemed to be broken in parts. It roughly enveloped the surface area of the planet, which was over 500 million square kilometers. It was still not satisfied with this. It borrowed the special nature of the Earth's magnetic field to merge its own magnetism into the planet's crust, mantle, and crust. It intersected with the different rotational speeds of the different layers of regions. It felt or attempted to play with the spatial magnetic field of this planet, and it fused with the surrounding distorted structure of space and time. At the same time, it closely followed the impact of the solar wind on the Earth's magnetic field. It mixed with the stream of rays and particles ejected from the polar regions. It naturally changed its nature and flowed deeper into the universe's space. It looked wanton and random, completely disregarding the integrity of its form. Or perhaps, as long as the subtle and profound magnetic structure existed, no matter how it tore and deformed, its essence was still one. As for whether or not its creator and controller could keep up, that was another matter. Of course, the magnetic optical mica had a reserved instinct in its endless process of expansion. Within the range of influence of its magnetic field, the magnetic optical mica used its special perspective to observe everything that existed in this area. It attempted to dismantle and piece them together into a more suitable structure. From Luonan's perspective, this could be considered a kind of aesthetic. Well, if he followed the magnetic optical mica's aesthetic taste, the world had a population of over 10 billion people. There were animals, plants, microorganisms, mutants, and other non-living existences that were trillions and trillions of times more numerous than humans. This included water, soil, minerals, and other non-living existences. It could be done slowly, or it could be done in an instant after accumulating enough energy. Every time Luo Nan touched the magnetic optical mica, he would feel a sense of accomplishment, as if he had saved the world. Fortunately, he managed to control this terrifying nature that humans could not understand, and did not let this being that he had created with the potential of a great monarch completely distort all life on Earth and even the space and time of its existence. The question was, who made this thing? No matter what, it was now under control. At the very least, there were no signs of it starting. Now that he thought about it, the magnetite mica he had encountered at the relay station was extremely powerful and had single-handedly suppressed the Heavenly Yuan Empire's army. However, if one were to look into it carefully, it was probably also restricted by the poisonous environment. Its range of influence was greatly reduced, and it only occupied a single planet. The distortion of space-time environment was also not strong enough. As for the one on Earth, it was still controlled, wasn't it? Luo Nan's mind raced a few times before he found the root of the problem. The problem lay in the restrictions. It was precisely because of his restrictions that the magnetic optical mica was unable to completely mold the space-time environment according to its aesthetic standards. There were certain rules and differences between the space-time of Earth and Earth. When Luo Nan came over, he relied on the cloud energy phantom of the magnetic optical mica that covered the entire world to realize the teleportation and shuttle. He followed the laws of the magnetic optical mica, and this formed a certain deviation from the true environment of Earth's spacetime. Luo Nan's recent experiments had all been conducted in the vicinity of Xia City. Even if there was a deviation, it wouldn't be too obvious. The only time he had done a long-distance teleportation, he had anchored the remains of the horned demon. It didn't have any value as a reference. Sure enough, there was no such thing as a perfect success in the first experiment. It was easy to improve after knowing the problem. Luo Nan already had a plan in mind. If he wanted to borrow the magnetic optical mica's fast tunnel and eliminate the error inside, he would either have to release the nature of the magnetic optical mica and let the Earth's spacetime it covered distort into the way it wished to. Or he would have to perform a correction calculation between the magnetic optical mica and the local spacetime. This could be solved with a configuration design. Luo Nan obviously chose the latter. Even if he had to expend a bit more mental energy, it would save him 100 times more energy than when he used the Luo clan's sandwich domain to forcefully break through the barrier between the two worlds and realize the teleportation leap. Then again, sometimes the stupidest method was the most correct method. If he wanted to go a step further in his understanding of space-time configuration, he could refer to the experience of a senior sovereign rank fantasy breed like the magnetic optical mica, but it wasn't appropriate to borrow it too often. It was better to balance things out. Luo Nan pondered and reflected in the wilderness for a bit. In the end, he still had to go do proper business. The wilderness wasn't like the main roads of Xia City. As long as he left the metropolitan area, there would be countless dangers and troubles. In the end, he was near the outskirts of the city. The military had turned from defense to offense in recent years, slaughtering and driving away the extremely dangerous mutants in the surroundings. Even if there were 2 or 3 mutants that escaped the net, Luo Nan would be instantly warped by the magnetic optical mica from a distance of 10 kilometers away. They would be turned into mincemeat. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to make a useful toy. Luo Nan didn't care about anything else. He recalibrated the position of the laboratory ruins and prepared to move over. But right at this time, a few reactions unexpectedly bumped into his core sensing network from the direction of Spring City. He turned his head. A surging yellow dragon had already risen in the boundless wilderness behind him. It was the sand and dust kicked up by off-road vehicles. The other party was heading in this direction at high speeds. Of course, Luo Nan could leave them in the dust in the blink of an eye, but he still stopped and looked back with a bit of curiosity. Not long after, several armed off-road vehicles that clearly bore the colors of the military appeared at the edge of his field of vision. It was just that they were limited by the uneven terrain of the hills, making them appear and disappear. The people within the thick armor certainly didn't have Luo Nan's perceptual ability. But with the support of the modern technological system, they utilized satellites and radars to form a network. They could still discover Luo Nan's existence ahead of time. This was under the premise that Luo Nan didn't deliberately conceal himself. Therefore, there were weapons on the armored off-road vehicles long before Luo Nan could see them. They locked onto the target from afar, and there were even unmanned surveillance drones flying towards them. Luo Nan raised his eyebrows. He just stood there, waiting to see how the other party would haggle. And over a dozen kilometers away, Lieutenant Colonel Chen of the Spring City Close Defense Army scratched his head within the vehicle that was stirring with dust. Where did this person pop out from? Fortunately, they weren't on patrol today. The problem was that they weren't on patrol. If they were on patrol, they would send drones to interrogate this youth who had suddenly appeared outside the city. After distinguishing him clearly, they would detain him and beat him. It would be much more refreshing. But right now, the first thing he thought of was to circle around him. Even if one didn't think with their knees, one would know that this youth who had suddenly appeared in the boundless wilderness was either an idiot or a lucky person. Or he was a special character that needed special attention. Looking at his bare body, he didn't look like the brainless donkey traveler of the present age who used his feet to measure the wilderness. He was dressed as if he was going to attend a funeral. Lieutenant Colonel Chen subconsciously glanced behind him. This was because the key person in the escort this time was dressed a bit similar to the one over there. He looked behind him. The old man he was paying attention to was frowning and closing his eyes. He was doing his best to fight against his motion sickness. And the guide that he had specially hired was sitting there in a very restrained manner. On the other hand, the valiant and beautiful female graduate student was leisurely fiddling with the projection. Yes, this person had quite a high level of authority. As long as she didn't randomly take pictures, she could do whatever she wanted. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was still bickering when someone said in his ear, "This person looks familiar." Captain Cho? Cho Wei, who was beside him, was a bit lower in rank than Lieutenant Colonel Chen. But he had the halo of a Spring City hero. He was also a full-time member in charge of this security mission. Lieutenant Colonel Chen still valued Cho Wei's opinion, especially when Cho Wei's words had substance. "You've seen him before?" Cho Wei shook his head. "I think I saw him in the distributed information." Lieutenant Colonel Chen cast his gaze towards the onboard AI projection interface. It had long since analyzed the recorded image, but there were no results. He could basically confirm that this person wasn't a resident of Spring City. Then, where did the information come from? Lieutenant Colonel Chen could only ask. As a burner, Cho Wei's authority in certain areas was above his. "Hello, Junior Luo?" Before Cho Wei could reply, the female graduate student had already turned on the communicator. She was probably calling the school. Lieutenant Colonel Chen frowned. Before he could say anything, his sensitive ears heard a faint echo from the other side. "Senior Sister Tang? I see you." The one who was surprised wasn't the other side, but the one in the car. The other side laughed. "I see you too." At this time, on the projected interface of the AI, the teenager waved his hand in the direction of the camera. Very quickly, the other side gave a thumbs up, looking like a poor backpacker asking for a ride. Lieutenant Colonel Chen only felt that it was absurd. At this moment, two people in the car spoke at the same time. "Stop the car." The one who spoke was the female graduate student who had called earlier. The other was Captain Cho Wei, who was beside her. At this moment, the car was only about 2 kilometers away from the teenager. Lieutenant Colonel Chen subconsciously replied, "Stop now." "Bring him up." The female graduate student replied matter-of-factly. Cho He actually didn't object. Lieutenant Colonel Chen's brows were tightly locked. Due to his trust in Cho He, a professional, he still readily agreed. "Stop over there for a moment." 2 minutes later, the armored motorcade stopped. The teenager boarded the car without a trace of politeness. His mouth was quite sweet as he repeatedly said things like, "Sorry for the trouble, everyone." As the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Chen actually didn't react. He just stared blankly at the information Cho He had pulled out. At this time, The old man in the back of the car who couldn't withstand the tossing and turning opened his eyes. He just happened to meet the teenager face to face. He was a bit muddle-headed from the motion sickness just now. "Hey, this is? You're Professor Wu?" The teenager's attitude was very respectful. He still bowed in the narrow space. "I've often heard Senior Sister Tang and Senior Sister Tian mention you and Professor Pan." The old man in the car was Professor Wu Zunliang. He was older but his mind was first class. He was startled for a moment before he straightened his back. Tianxi? Here? Yes, she's mentioned you many times. Qingwen and Zhongheng's child, Luo Yuandao's grandson, Luo Nan. Luo Nan bowed again. "It's me, Professor Wu." Chapter 11:22. Sure enough, it was Luo Nan. Lieutenant Colonel Chen pulled his gaze away from the information with great difficulty. Even though the content he saw was incomplete due to the issue of authority, the master before him was undoubtedly a huge trouble on the level of a human-shaped killing machine. Last year in Xia City, last month in Ban City, he had caused a great deal of panic. Now he had come to Spring City. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was unwilling to let Luo Nan get on the car. Of course he was unwilling, but this master had even made the gesture of hitching a ride. If Lieutenant Colonel Chen dared to refuse, only the heavens knew whether or not an infrasonic wave would immediately follow. Of course, looking at Lieutenant Colonel Chen's attitude toward Professor Wu Zunliang, the infrasonic wave would most likely have a direction. The target would only be Lieutenant Colonel Chen himself. All sorts of thoughts rose and fell in Lieutenant Colonel Chen's mind. He madly added scenes for himself, but in the end, it was only a method to reduce the pressure. As a qualified military personnel, he promptly sent the news of Luo Nan's appearance in Spring City to the higher command nodes, giving those truly powerful people headaches. But then again, Luo Nan was the most worry-free person in the car just from the surface. He perfectly displayed the cleverness that a person his age should have in front of a senior like Wu Zunliang. "Oh my God, I called you so many times. Why didn't you come to the house?" In the end, it was our family's old Pan who took the initiative to find you. Wu Zunliang was an old man who was full of energy. His voice was loud and clear. Once his emotions rose, there was no room for others to speak. Plus, he was good at making decisions for others. He pulled Luo Nan to sit beside him and spoke over and over again. "You're going to offer sacrifices, right? Who are you coming with? By yourself? This is too dangerous. Let's go together. Let's go together." What else could Luo Nan say aside from nodding? Even in Acumen College, Professor Wu Zunliang was famous for his temper and nagging. He was like this with people he hated, and he was like this with people he liked. A dozen seconds later, Luo Nan couldn't take it anymore. His gaze turned to Tang Yi, who was also peony. Tang intentionally used the brim of her hat to block his line of sight. Luo Nan was helpless. He could only save himself. He took the initiative to pull Wu Zunliang into a new topic. "Didn't your research come to an end? Did you come to Spring City to take it a step further? Hey, you pay attention to this field as well? Did you listen to the report at the academy?" "I was out of town at the time, but it's true that I've been paying attention all this time. Senior Sister Tang has provided me with quite a bit of information." Luo Nan quickly dragged Tang Yi into the water. "Senior Sister never mentioned this to you?" "Thanks to her care, I have a laboratory in the Mystic Arts Research Society under her rule, which is at North Shore Gear." Wu Zunliang wasn't an old pedant with a one-track mind. His emotions had just gotten to the top of his head, but now his thoughts spun a few more times. He recalled the relevant information his wife had mentioned, as well as a few rumors within the circle. He used his old eyes that weren't dizzy to size up Luo Nan a few more times. "You're so young. You're only 16, and you're already taking over old Luo's job?" 17. Luo Nan corrected him seriously. "Looking at your face and listening to your croaky voice, I'd believe it even if you cut off 3 or 5 years. As for your height, there's still room for improvement. Back then, Zhongheng and Qingwen weren't short." Wu Zunliang saw that Luo Nan was about to stray thousands of miles from the main topic, but he used his rich experience to pull the topic back. I heard from old Pan that you're more interested in Qingwen's original path. You seem to have quite some achievements. You rely on your own ability to make a living. You're young, but you're amazing. Luo Nan laughed. You flatter me. There's no need to flatter me. I still have more to say. We men aren't strangers. There are some things I'm not afraid to say to you. From the looks of it, this project is quite imaginative. It can incite people even more. In comparison, the evidence is a bit weaker. It's fine for a young man to be interested. You don't have to worry about putting your energy into it. But you need to make thorough preparations. Don't have thoughts of accomplishing everything in one go. Tang Yi lowered her head, pulling the brim of her hat even lower. Luo Nan blinked. Then you came over this time for the sake of enriching evidence? I'm here to fan the flames for the investor. I want to see if I can stir up a few sparks. Wu Zuanliang really didn't avoid it at all. You have to do a few things to spend other people's money. It's still a bit early for you to learn these things. Luo Nan laughed again. Wu Zuanliang couldn't really lead a child astray, so he changed the topic. All right. Let me introduce you. This is Dr. Wang Xiu. He once worked with Qingwen in the laboratory. This time, I'm asking him to take us to the laboratory ruins. He was referring to the tightest person in the car. Luo Nan turned his gaze and bowed slightly to the balding middle-aged man. Hello, Dr. Wang. Hello. Wang Xiu looked like a pure researcher. He wasn't very good at socializing. He needed Wu Zuanliang to liven up the atmosphere. Wang Xiu, you should have met Luo Nan before. He stayed in the wilderness for nearly 3 years when he was young. I've met him before. In the health pod? Wang Xiu instinctively felt that something was wrong when he spoke to this point. He hurriedly shut his mouth, but he didn't know how to continue. He was stuck there. Luo Nan was a bit startled, but a smile soon formed on the corner of his mouth. I've heard my aunt talk about this before. It's just that it's been passed down a few times. I don't know the details anymore. I can only guess blindly by myself. Is the health pod still there? It was still there when we left. Wang Xiu was shrouded by Luo Nan's gaze. He inexplicably felt a bit breathless. His words were a mess. Then there was an earthquake. I don't know what happened. Earthquake? Luo Nan's consciousness was a bit erratic. Lieutenant Colonel Chen adjusted his state of mind at this time. He took the initiative to talk. In 94, a group of volcanoes in the southwest suddenly erupted, causing an earthquake in the surroundings of Spring City. The laboratory was abandoned for many years. It wasn't maintained, so it was unfortunately destroyed. But there wasn't any subsequent excavations. It's basically still in a natural state. Luo Nan nodded towards Lieutenant Colonel Chen. Actually, he had already learned of the relevant information before coming here. The source of the information was none other than Dr. Wang Xiu, who was in the car. Luo Nan's mind wandered just now because he thought of the source of the destruction of the laboratory ruins. It was a headless case of the inner world, the disappearance of the extraordinary Jin Buhuan. Under the relatively restricted environment of space and time, 2 or more matters that were originally completely unrelated would have a high probability of being related. And the more information a person grasped, the higher their position, and the wider their field of view, the more frequent this sort of coincidence or interaction would be in their eyes. The current Luo Nan was probably one of the most qualified people on Earth to speak such words. He didn't need to share his feelings in this kind of environment. He just smiled at Wang Xiu. You really did the right thing in finding Dr. Wang? I heard from Yin Lu this morning that you contacted her and asked if everyone was in the same group. At the time, I thought that I had other arrangements, so I didn't come together. But I never thought that it would be such a coincidence that the high and the low would converge. It's nothing. It's nothing. Dr. Wang Xiu wasn't an idiot. He had already said this, so how could he not know Luo Nan's identity? It was just that there was a bit of a psychological barrier when it came to connecting the rich and overbearing financial backer, the boss of the woman with the extraordinary way of talking, with this 16 or 17-year-old youth before him. He was a bit dazed for a time. Wu Zuanliang introduced Lieutenant Colonel Chen to Luo Nan, saying that Luo Nan had settled down at the supply base that Lieutenant Colonel Chen was in charge of last year. Everyone had a pleasant cooperation and so on. Luo Nen didn't say anything to this person. He was just polite. However, Luo Nan's attitude towards Cho Wei, the head of security responsible for Wu Zuinoyang's group, was a bit different. You must be Captain Cho. I've heard a lot about you. Senior Sister Tang just so happened to be in Spring City at the end of last year. She even specially introduced your deeds. Sister Yuan also mentioned you. She said that you are firm and unyielding. If you weren't like this, then you wouldn't have such deeds. It seems that you and Tian Bang are in the same batch? You flatter me. Cho Wei had experienced many trials and tribulations during this period of time. He had already trained the ability to remain unfazed by praise and humiliation. His response towards Luo Nan's praise was indifferent. Of course, part of this was because he was the same as Lieutenant Colonel Chin. He didn't know how to interact with this highly dangerous person in a more appropriate manner. Lieutenant Colonel Chin promptly interjected at this time, Mr. Luo Nan, did you come to Spring City specifically to visit a grave? Lieutenant Colonel Chen actually accompanied Luo Nan out of courtesy in the escort team. This was mainly because the wilderness laboratory ruins were within the range of his supply base. Cho Wei had taken over Senior Colonel Meng Tu's position from last year. This also resulted in some words that Cho Wei spoke rather stiffly. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was relatively more natural. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Chen's slick mind wasn't within the scope of Luo Nan's consideration. He shook his head, I can't say. It's just a thought. Luo Nan's response was more or less unexpected. Lieutenant Colonel Chen choked for a moment. Tang Yi's gaze turned to Dr. Wang at this time. Dr. Wang was a bit startled. Fortunately, he reacted and took the initiative to explain, Dr. Bu wasn't buried here. The environment of the wilderness back then was much worse than it is now. When we come to work in the wilderness laboratory, we have to do two things before we start working. The first is to sign a risk notice. The second is to make a will. After Dr. Bu passed away, her ashes were scattered in the wilderness according to the requirements of her will. There was nothing we could do about it. Wu Zuinliang had a wealth of experience working in the wilderness. He patted Luo Nan's hand and sighed. There's no such thing as a calm burial in the wilderness. There's no space for a peaceful burial. The best ending for an unfortunate death here is to leave behind a handful of ashes. Qingwen was a bit more free and easy than others. Wang Xiulian nodded. Actually, we advised him to bring the ashes back to the city, but Dr. Luo still followed the will. At that time, he drove to the plateau alone. I heard that he threw it near a frontline laboratory. Luo Nan's gaze cut over, and Dr. Wang subconsciously shut his mouth. He didn't know if he said something wrong or not. Wu Zuinliang did not pay attention to these details. He continued to muse, all these years, my old Pan has been brooding over this. He doesn't even know where Qingwen is buried. It wasn't easy for me to get the news from Luo Yuan, but it's just like what you said, Xiao Nan. Luo Nan didn't look at anyone this time. His eyelids drooped as he repeated the key words from Wu Zuinoyang's words. Luo Yuan? Chapter 11:23. Wu Zuinliang went, oh, it's that young fellow who came from the same orphanage as Qingwen. He should be 50 years old this year. Back then, he almost became my graduate student. In the end, he became Qingwen's follower and went to the wilderness. You're young. You probably don't have an impression. No, I have a very good impression. After all, it was a rarely seen dimensional crossbow that utilized the laws of the polar domain. It nearly took my life. Of course, Luo Nen just revealed a smile at this time. He seems to have been operating a business in the wilderness these past few years. He's doing quite well. He also has a stake in Dr. Wang's company. Wu Zuinliang was rather emotional. It's not easy. Really? Luo Nan's gaze followed Wu Zuinoyang's description and he saw Dr. Wang's expression turn a bit odd. Dr. Wang just nodded his head over and over. From the perspective of a city dweller, the meaning behind operating a business in the wilderness and doing well was quite subtle. Wu Zuinliang was quite natural. We originally agreed to go together, but he had something to do at the last minute, so he introduced Dr. Wang. Has he been in contact with you guys these past few years? No. I heard my aunt mention that the two of them communicated when Dad was here, but their relationship didn't seem to be too good. Half of Luo Nan's words were fabricated. He had indeed heard the main contents of the story from Mrs. Luo Shuqing once. Of course, Mrs. Luo Shuqing had only mentioned a fellow with the surname Luo at the time. Due to a certain suggestion from her father, the project succeeded. The fellow called her father in his excitement and cursed him, calling him a deserter, a piece of trash, and so on. Luo Nan had some suspicions about who it was, but he didn't know for sure. But from the contents relayed by his aunt, it should be someone active in the wilderness, someone who once worked together with his father. Luo Nan highly suspected that this Luo was actually Luo, but he didn't have any clear evidence. But they were chatting right now. They needed to gather information and expand in depth. They needed a starting point. Professor Wu Zunliang laughed and sighed when he heard this. The matters of young people? Of course, he's not young anymore. He changed the topic at this point. Little Nan, you're in your prime. I heard you talk about this sister and that sister. You seem to know quite a few. You seem to be quite likable? Huh? Yeah, everyone knows about Boss Luo's hobbies. Tang Yi added with a smile. Realization dawned on Wu Zunliang. I remember now. Old Pan did mention this before. In the end, Luo Nan had seen many shameless people during this period of time. He had many references when imitating them. Luo Nan just revealed an awkward yet polite smile. Then he quickly changed topics. You know, my situation here is special. Uncle and Aunt don't talk to me about what happened in the past. It's impossible to ask Grandpa, old Luo. I haven't seen him for a few years. The older I get, the more I can't stand it. How is he? Luo Nan responded in a reserved manner. It can't be any worse. Professor Wu Zunliang sighed yet again. His heart was filled with feelings of pity for this little fellow, Luo Nan. He strove to recall more and more, displaying his specialty in nagging to start a long chat mode. He still felt that this was not enough. He even took the initiative to start a video call with Professor Panwen. First, he dragged Luo Nan over to appear on camera together. He showed off today's wondrous travel experience. As expected, he stirred up the emotions of Professor Panwen. Then he dragged his wife over to talk about the past. That's where the convoy is. They quickly advanced toward the laboratory ruins in this atmosphere. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, whose mind was filled with past events, was roughly a dozen kilometers away. He was worried about whether or not he would encounter additional risks due to knowing too much. At the same time, he dutifully informed Luo Nan, there's around 5 minutes left. Are we almost there? The limited field of view of the armored vehicle clearly couldn't satisfy Wu Zunliang's requirements. He simply stood up and looked through the windshield in front of him. Just stop for a bit. Professor Panwen felt quite helpless towards his wife's temperament. The two of them were both loud and clear. They had a few conflicts when they were talking about the past. It was inevitable that they would get a bit tired after yelling at each other from several thousand kilometers away. He took this opportunity to take the initiative to call a truce. We're almost there. We need to take care of things. What's the point of being so anxious and pale? Luo Nan. Professor Pan. I've heard quite a bit of news about you these past 2 days. Let's not talk about anything else. Since you've already made a name for yourself, you need to put on an act. Let your mother's soul in heaven be at ease. Let my shop shine. Oh my! What are you saying these pretentious words for? Wu Zunliang pointed at the projection area in annoyance. Luo Nan chuckled and responded with drooping eyes, as you wish. Professor Panwen seemed to laugh and sigh. He simply cut off the video. Wu Zunliang was still mumbling, I'm afraid I've seen too much in the past 2 years. I didn't realize it before. No one dared to respond. At this time, it was the turn of the others to take the initiative to change the topic. Tang Yi estimated the distance and turned to Dr. Wang. I remember you saying before you came that senior sister Qingwen didn't stay in this laboratory for long. Yeah. From what I remember, Dr. Bu stayed in the 100 Races laboratory for around half a year. She was mainly in the Highland Frontier laboratory before. She might not come down even once in a year or two. The main reason she came down this time was to wait to give birth. She seems to be suffering from severe altitude sickness. Dr. Wang's voice grew softer and softer. Even though his EQ was lacking, he felt that it was inappropriate to speak halfway through and associate what happened later. Plus, Luo Nan was separated from him by Professor Wu. Though he still had a smile on his face, Dr. Wang inexplicably felt that the atmosphere in the car had become very oppressive. He instinctively wanted to shut his mouth, but the young boss Luo, who came up to get a free ride, leaned forward slightly. His smiling and curved eyebrows were completely exposed before Dr. Wang's eyes. He took the initiative to ask, "I know a bit about Mom's matters on the Highland. That can be considered her profession. In this laboratory, the 100 races, right? What is she doing?" This was like the pure curiosity of a child. At least Luo Nen showed it this way. It looked like he wasn't thinking too much. If Dr. Wang hadn't communicated with Mrs. Yin these past few days, he might have believed Luo Nan when he saw Luo Nan's standard, obedient grandson appearance. But he had such a meticulous and capable subordinate. Moreover, Luo Nan had casually extended his hand to stop the military vehicle. Luo Nan made Lieutenant Colonel Chen and Captain Cho exceptionally cautious and well-behaved. Could such a fellow really be pure and stupid? Dr. Wang relied on his IQ to see some clues, but his EQ was insufficient to support an appropriate response. The more this was the case, the more speechless he became. Next to him, Luo Nan's seemingly simple and pure smile gave him more and more pressure. Fortunately, Tang Yi followed Luo Nan's lead and asked at this time, "Dr. Wang, you research genetic engineering, right? Since the 100 Races laboratory is in the wilderness, it should be researching mutant genes, right? Our fields of study cross paths." "Yes. But I'm doing it very shallowly. I'm saying that I'm doing it relatively shallowly. Actually, I'm really ashamed of the 10 years I've spent since returning from the wilderness." As long as he could open his mouth to speak, he could erase the awkwardness and reduce the pressure he felt from Luo Nan. Dr. Wang couldn't care less. "Actually, the things I'm researching right now are much shallower and more fragmented than when I was in the laboratory. Let's not talk about the direction. There are many rules and regulations that I don't dare to jump out of." Having said this, Dr. Wang looked at the two military personnel at the front of the vehicle. He couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. Tang Yi just so happened to continue at this time. "I heard my teacher say that Mr. Luo Yuandao's level of thought experimentation and project design is far from what the results of the laboratory can reflect." "That's not what I said." Wu Zunliang chuckled. "My original words are that the things in his brain are like flying a kite. The wind is just a bit stronger, and all the serious experiments that are tied to the back of his head fly away." Having said this, the old man felt that Tang Yi was going a bit overboard when he saw the gaze Tang Yi cast over. He hurriedly patted the back of Luo Nan's hand twice. "You understand the intent. You understand the intent." Tang Yi's explanation is quite good. Luo Nan smiled and nodded. "I understand. Sometimes, grandfather's train of thought is dragged particularly far away. However, I feel that his research on the biological plane is quite solid. I've only studied a portion of the notes. It's mainly some knowledge on the application of targeted drugs. But I feel that there should be even more fundamental things existing beneath this applied knowledge. So I want to ask Dr. Wang, what was the research related to genetic engineering back in the 100 Races laboratory? Were there any clearer results? You wouldn't have a confidentiality agreement or something like that, right?" The agreement has already expired. Actually, later on, Dean Luo." "Oh, that's Mr. Luo Yuandao. That's what we all called him back then. When Dean Luo was investigated, the relevant agreement became invalid." "So you're saying that a lot of the results have already leaked out?" "You can say that." Dr. Wang's forehead unconsciously beaded with sweat. He didn't know why the topic had suddenly changed to such a sensitive and serious direction. He still wanted to salvage the situation. At this time, talking about the details of Bo Qingwen back then didn't seem that hard to accept. There were indeed many topics in the laboratory back then, including the controversial formatting theory. But I didn't come into contact with these things back then, and I didn't really understand them. From what I know, Dr. Bo was mainly recuperating back then. He didn't take on any specific tasks. From what I remember, helping little Wu design a special petri dish is one of them. Little Wu? Wu Jun? Wu Zuanliang interrupted. I haven't seen Wu Jun in 6 or 7 years. Luo Nan blinked his eyes. Aunt Wu Jun's surname is also Wu. She's your. You can say she's related. After all, you can't write 2 Wus in one stroke. Hey, do you remember things from your childhood? Or did I just say? I met her friends and family in Spring City. Luo Nan was referring to Yen Fun and Polio, whom he met in the U-Hole market in Spring City. As his thoughts spun, Polio, the former bosom friend, who viewed his father as an enemy, flashed in Luo Nan's mind with a stubborn and adorable face. Luo Nan subconsciously laughed, but he soon frowned. The car slowed down at this time. They arrived at the laboratory ruins. Chapter 11:24. When he got out of the car, Wu Zuanliang was still confused. Home? There shouldn't be anyone left in her family. Back then, old Luo Tua Panda was old Pan's younger brother. At that time, he was working in Spring City. Old Luo asked him to help recruit a few graduate students who could work nearby. I felt that it was tough for Wu Jun to study alone in Spring City, so I spoke up for her. Yes, it's Professor Panda. Lil Wu and I were recruited in the same batch as him. Lil Wu is the youngest in this batch. Dr. Wang was the first to get out of the car. He breathed in the slightly hot and dry air of the wilderness and felt that the pressure on him had lessened a little. His body movements became a lot livelier, and he nodded like he was pounding garlic. When it was Wu Zuanliang's turn, he refused Tang Yi's support. When Luo Nan took over, he didn't refuse, but he still put on a vigorous posture. He even jumped a little at the end. At the same time, he did not stop talking. At that time, I was also thinking that Wu Jun's personality was relatively weak, and she would not be able to come up with anything on her own. She might as well borrow old Luo's name to train herself. In the end, she really dived headfirst into it. It's just that your Luo family has infected her with mysteriousness. She didn't even say anything about that project of hers. It was old Luo who mentioned it earlier that it was an ecological network at the genetic level aimed at the mutants. Distributed aberration gene network ecology research, Professor Wang blurted out. It was rare for him to say the name so fluently. Luo Nan raised his eyebrows, but then he took the initiative to change the topic. Your joints and muscles are quite active. Luo Nan gave an appropriate evaluation. She usually takes care of herself properly. She soaks in the health pod quite a bit. Moreover, it should be targeted training. Wu Zuanliang felt that Luo Nan's words were objective and that his vision was unique. Wu Zuanliang felt quite comforted in his heart. City people do field work. Don't they have to put in a bit of effort? As the old man spoke, he stood still and looked around. This area was still very desolate, but within his field of vision, including the area under his feet, he could see faint traces of human activity. Occasionally, he could see edges and corners in the depths of the weeds, which were the remains of some buildings. This place was indeed in ruins, the kind that was completely destroyed. The most eye-catching thing in the vicinity was the vehicle and personnel that they had brought with them. Other than the armed vehicle that had transported them over, there were nearly 20 soldiers or military-style bodyguards on the other 2 armored vehicles. They were all equipped with exoskeletons, and there were even 4 deep blue walkers inside. They had already pulled up a cordon around them. Generally speaking, 1 or 2 grade B ability users would not dare to provoke this team. Luo Nan looked at Tang. Your sponsor is quite generous. After all, it's a project that has a high chance of being selected as one of the Star Alliance's Millennium-focused topics. Furthermore, it's especially easy to use in terms of concept and size. Tang Yi pinched the brim of her hat and smiled subtly. Compared to the possible profits, the research funding is only a small amount. At this time, Lieutenant Colonel Chen walked over from the front of the car. Professor Wu, according to the data in the database, there are no longer any mutant species of B and above in the surrounding area. The closest mutant nest is 200 kilometers away, so it's basically safe. But it's best if we don't stay for too long. This is still an area where low-altitude predators frequently roam. Wu Zunliang agreed without meaning it. His gaze shifted from Luo Nan's face to Dr. Wang. We don't have any concept of this place. We'll leave the rest to you. It's been a few years since I've been here. I definitely remember the way. Right now, Dr. Wang was practically the focus of everyone's attention. He couldn't help but be a bit nervous. He subconsciously found an excuse for himself, but soon he made another statement under Luo Nan's gaze. He gestured with his hand as he spoke, inviting the group of people to move forward. There's actually quite a distance between this place and the original core area of the laboratory. What we see before us is just a defensive bunker from back then. Half of it is above ground and the other half is underground. The laboratory is completely underground, so the damage caused by the earthquake was extremely severe. Luo Nen didn't understand, so he asked, "Why is it underground? There's a natural karst cave there. But wouldn't that be even more dangerous? The danger level of mutants will be even higher in a humid environment with little light or even no light." Dr. Wang was speechless. Luckily, Luo Nen didn't delve too deeply into the matter. The group of people continued forward. The outer cordon also moved along with them. There were also 3 armed vehicles, causing quite a clamor in the wasteland. Luo Nen cast his gaze over, but he didn't say anything in the end. However, Lieutenant Colonel Chun, who had been paying attention to the changes in Luo Nan's expression, immediately pulled on Captain Chow's arm. He exchanged a few glances with Captain Cho. Perhaps there was also internal communication. In short, Captain Cho hesitated for a few seconds before giving the order to have the armed vehicles stand by. Only the security personnel followed. Without the rumbling of machinery, the surrounding environment suddenly became much quieter. It was to the extent that Dr. Wang's voice became all the clearer. Since he was stumped by the question just now, he did his best to change the topic to a direction he was good at while acting as a tour guide. The vast majority of our group of people participate in the distributed gene project. We differentiate and separate mutant genes, determine their growing environment, and think of ways to make them live together. It's similar to mulling over a microscopic ecosphere. According to Dean Luo's words, structure is the most important thing. Whether it's the structure of the ecological food chain or the structure of the physical bearing space environment. Dr. Wang's words became more and more fluent when he spoke of familiar technical fields. Back in the laboratory, we were mainly in charge of the design of the food chain. Little Wu was mainly in charge of designing an idealized coexistence environment. Both sides worked hard together to ensure that they were able to complete a cyclic dynamic gene competition map in a continuous space-time environment. They used this to compare the nature and evolutionary trends of the various mutant genes that appeared in the wilderness. They wanted to see which ones were stronger and which ones were weaker. They wanted to see whether or not they were in line with the actual environment of the mutant species in the wilderness. On the other hand, they wanted to find an ideal genetic coding sequence. Those who dabble in biology are basically pursuing these things. Wu Zunliang gave a brief evaluation. Then he looked pensive. "I've seen your thesis online. Indeed, a considerable portion of it is in the field of gene competition. Even though it's been over a decade, it's still quite insightful looking at it now." Dr. Wang could only say, "I'm ashamed." At this time, he was already unable to stop himself. He continued to speak emotionally. "For the sake of enriching the gene pool, we've really had many dealings with mutants over the years. All kinds of experiments. Especially the genetic samples of some powerful mutants. The laboratory has no way of collecting them. It's especially troublesome to go through official channels. We can only entrust it to the wilderness hunters and tribes. We have to spend large sums of money every year. There were several times when I thought that the laboratory wouldn't be able to support itself, but in the end, we didn't fall because of money. Instead, we fell because of other messy matters." Wu Zunliang sighed. He wanted to say a few more words, but it was dull and tasteless. The group had already walked over 200 meters in by now. Lieutenant Colonel Chen dutifully informed them, "There's a collapsed area up ahead. For the sake of safety, it's better to maintain a certain distance." Dr. Wang also agreed. The structure of the collapsed area is unstable. Oh, actually, that area used to be one of the safe areas of the laboratory. It was Dr. Bu's time. It suffered an impact and became relatively weak. It collapsed the most severely during the earthquake. Luo Nan turned to look at him. "Is it there?" "Actually, it's a bit to the side." Dr. Wang did his best to organize his words. In the year 80, the laboratory had already been captured. Everyone was hiding in a safe house. In the end, they were threatened by those people outside with explosions. It seems that there were mutants that could travel through the soil and so on. It was a complete mess. The collapsed area was the area that suffered the heaviest damage back then. Everyone was in a state of panic for the next few years. Their finances were strained, so they never had time to repair it. Dr. Wang didn't describe the situation back then clearly, aside from becoming long-winded due to his nervousness. He didn't even know as much as Luo Nan did from the data. However, it was this lively mood that drew in a feeling of immersion that was hard to embody with the cold numbers in the manuscript. Luo Nan's gaze stopped on Dr. Wang's face. Perhaps it was because of his gaze that Dr. Wang was unable to continue. It's probably because of this reason. Luo Nan pursed his lips slightly. "Dr. Wang, you know that I don't really care about why this place has become like this. If it was possible, I would like to hear more about the matters concerning my mother." It's like this. Dr. Bo really lived in seclusion back then. The laboratory's environment wasn't too suitable for pregnant women, so we didn't see her often. In fact, if it wasn't for the accident, I heard that Dr. Bo would have been transferred to Spring City to have a miscarriage. Why didn't she go earlier to have a miscarriage? Why did the accident happen? Dr. Wang was stumped. A low and hoarse voice rang out in front of the group of people during this awkward moment. It overflowed the security personnel's warning line and was clearly transmitted. "Why are there so many whys? If you really want to find a reason, it's nothing more than the terrible curiosity of your Luo family. It brought out bad luck, trouble, and calamity. It infected her and destroyed her. That's all." The security personnel on the warning line and their equipped exoskeletons, including the 4 deep blue walkers, only responded with an alarm after the voice rang out. The 3 armored vehicles that were lagging behind started up accordingly and came whistling over. However, the person who caused all of this did not make any further moves. Earlier he had walked up from the entrance of the collapsed area as if he was walking up a staircase. He stood at the edge of the area, wearing the lab coat that was not buttoned up. The corner of his coat was swaying along with the hot and dry air of the wilderness. At first glance, it looked like the staff who stayed behind to welcome the arrival of the guests. Wu Zuanliang was immediately blocked by Captain Cho, but the old man's eyes were very sharp, and he had already recognized the identity of the figure. Luo Yuan. Chapter 1125. An unexpected character had appeared so openly in front of the warning line. Moreover, the alarm had only sounded after the other party had spoken. This was undoubtedly a humiliating failure for Captain Cho and the other security personnel. But Captain Cho didn't have the leisure to taste humiliation. He immediately made adjustments. Through the dynamo core implanted in his body, he commanded the security personnel at the front of the warning line to adjust their formation. He formed a link with the other 4 deep blue walkers in the formation to construct a formatted space together. It was also at this moment that Captain Chao's body, which was originally like an ordinary person's, began to bulge. The fine bone fiber structure flipped out of his muscles and soon formed a dense layer, forming a complicated and regular arrangement. There was also a dark blue reflection on the edge, as if it was a fish-scale armor made of steel. In reality, the inner layer of this armor did indeed have a large amount of traces of special strengthening. It was absolutely not the result of a simple mutation. Clearly, While Captain Cho was undergoing treatment in isolation, whether it was out of his own will or not, he had indeed received a considerable degree of research and modification, so much so that he could perform some kind of active mutation and achieve a deep integration with the Deep Blue platform. Captain Cho, can you assist our Foundation in doing some research later? Captain Cho's expression was mostly hidden under the scale armor. Moreover, he was facing straight ahead. No changes could be seen. On the other side, Lieutenant Colonel Chen couldn't help but turn his head. He just happened to see Luo Nan, who had been supporting Wu Zuanliang as a polite junior. Luo Nan withdrew his hand and went straight ahead. There was even a bit of a smile on his face as he passed by Captain Cho. He gave the former a slight nod. Perhaps it was an illusion. But in any case, from Lieutenant Colonel Chen's point of view, Luo Nan wasn't the least bit surprised by this unexpected situation. Moreover, Captain Cho and Lieutenant Colonel Chen didn't have the right to stop him if he wanted to go forward. Only Wu Zuanliang sensed that the atmosphere wasn't right. He raised his voice and shouted, "Luo Nan." It was also at this moment that the two names that came out of his mouth looked at each other across the warning line. Compared to Luo Yuan's preemptive show of strength, Luo Nan's observation was more meticulous. Or perhaps it could be said that he was a bit more brazen. He sized up the person in front of him from head to toe, especially the person's obviously old clothes. Several seconds later, Luo Nan spoke with an admiring tone. "It's really amazing to be able to find clothes to cover your body in this environment." Luo Yuan's gaze never left Luo Nan. When he heard Luo Nan's words, his overly thin cheeks twitched slightly. But in the end, he still responded indifferently. "After all, I've stayed here for a long time. It's normal for me to keep some clothes." The people around them were confused, but the two didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Luo Nan turned his head around and nodded at the stupefied Dr. Wang. "It looks like a more suitable explanation has come uninvited." Dr. Wang did not know whether to respond or not. The muscles on Luo Yuan's cheeks twitched again, and he smiled coldly. "I don't want to say it again. Personal emotions can't be taken seriously. That's the truth. Are you flaunting your preposterous bigotry in front of me?" Luo Nan continued to walk forward, easily crossing the line of exoskeleton armor. The distance between him and Luo Yuan grew closer and closer. "Today you seem to be very happy to display the image of a frustrated and infatuated person in front of me. This isn't even as refreshing as last year's dimensional crossbow. Is it because I'm not so easy to kill now, so you might as well change your method? Are you preparing to disgust me to death?" Luo Yuan's smile seemed to deepen a bit. "You should be enduring the disgust and doing some unqualified but necessary things. Is this the rumored sociopath? Well, I'm not surprised." Luo Nan had already arrived at the edge of the caved-in area. The distance between him and Luo Yuan was no more than 3 meters. From his angle, he could already see the bumpy edges of the caved-in cavern wall, as well as the chaos at the bottom. Yes, there was also the remains of the lizard mutant that had just been possessed and transformed by Luo Yuan. Right now, only a few broken scales remained. This was also a cloned body produced by Luo Yuan's laboratory. It had to be said that Luo Yuan's technological route was compatible with Luo Yuan's ability. Luo Nan had prepared ahead of time, and the results were almost the same as Luo Nan's spatial shift. Only the heavens knew how many similar chess pieces Luo Yuan had planted over the years. What level had the production capacity of his laboratory reached? If Luo Nan wanted to get rid of Luo Yuan cleanly and efficiently, he would need to find the unchanging behind the myriad of transformations. All of this happened in a flash of thought. Luo Nan and Luo Yuan looked face to face again, and their eyes carried a bit of killing intent. As for Luo Yuan, the thoughts of his kind had not changed at all. It was just that in this place, in this environment, and in this atmosphere, everyone was more restrained. That was all. Luo Nan was now a bit sociopath. The evidence was that he had begun to seriously consider having a chat with Luo Yuan. At the very least, he wanted to collect some first-hand information for future preparations. "Mr. Luo Yuan, although I don't really understand this society, I know that when it comes to socializing, you need to be honest on the surface at the very least. You see, regarding the matters of the past, especially the matters related to my mother. So the people of the Luo family are really people who are willing to be scolded. Luo Nan's gaze continued to grow cold, and so did Luo Yuan. And at this time, Tang Yi suddenly spoke from behind the cordon. Her target was Lieutenant Colonel Chen, who was in a highly tense state. Mr. Lieutenant Colonel, you're from Spring City, right? Were you still in school in the 80s? I went to military school. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was a qualified sociopath. He quickly reacted after receiving Tang Yi's signal. He successfully organized his words. I was already in military school in the 80s. It was no different from entering the army. So, you have an understanding of the wilderness back then? I didn't just attend classes. I also had patrol missions. Lieutenant Colonel Chen slowly got on the right track. He began to take the initiative to speak. It was much more chaotic than it is now. Not only were the mutants wreaking havoc, but there were also roaming bandit squads composed of vagrants. For a convoy like ours, we basically killed our way through 100 kilometers. Tang Yi entered the role of a supporting character. It's understandable. I just calculated. The distance between the 100 Races laboratory and the nearest supply base is approximately 200 kilometers. It's more than that. The one we passed through was newly built in the year 93. The original base was 180 kilometers further back. It was very easy for mutants or vagrant bandits to cut off the road with such a distance back then. Lieutenant Colonel Chen thought of Luo Nan's previous question and was the first to come to a sudden realization. Also, the 80s were affected by several Type A mutants. The first half of the year was the bleeding season around Spring City. It was even more dangerous. Generally speaking, regular and necessary trips into the wilderness would have to wait until the second half of the year. This situation was only alleviated after the all-out counterattack in recent years and the elimination of the key sources of danger. The so-called bleeding season was similar to the rushing tide in coastal cities. They were both names for large-scale riots by the mutants in the wilderness. This explained why Bo Qingwen was clearly pregnant at the time. Why was she still in the wilderness? Of course, looking at it from another angle, the pregnancy was inappropriate. Luo Zhonghen could also be blamed for it. Luo Nan turned his head to look. His gaze passed through the array of exoskeleton armors and saw Tang Yi, the tallest of them all. Regardless of whether or not Tang Yi could see him, Luo Nan still smiled subconsciously. It was unknown what encouraged Dr. Wang at this time. He spoke in a weak voice. Speaking of the bleeding season, I seem to remember a bit. Tang Yi continued to cooperate with him. Is it related to the bleeding season? It's the surrounding tribes. Dr. Wang did his best to recall. Back then, the laboratory was able to stand over there. A good portion of it was because we got along well with the vagrant tribes next to us. Sometimes bandits would surround us, and everyone would help each other out. But the bleeding season that year was especially long. The tribes that had a good relationship with us were all hurt. Some of them were even forced to migrate to the northwest to avoid the agitated volcanic areas. Especially when the weather turned hot, which was in June, the laboratory received a lot of injured people. They were all from tribes that we were familiar with. Then, something happened a few days later. Luo Nan's extraordinary perception wasn't affected by the distance of a dozen meters. He could hear Dr. Wang's voice no matter how weak it was. As the information entered his mind, many fuzzy details gradually became clear. Suddenly, he thought of something and raised his voice to ask, Dr. Wang, when the accident happened back then, this is the person next to me. Is he there? Luo Yuan's gaze pierced over, but Luo Nan completely ignored him. The person on the warning line stammered a few times before finally responding vaguely, he shouldn't be there. Only then did Luo Nan return Luo Yuan's gaze. Then, why are you acting like he was there? Luo Yuan was silent for 2 seconds. Then he suddenly laughed. Yeah, I wasn't there. That damned old man of yours wasn't there. Luo Yuan Dao wasn't there either. All of us weren't there. So, Qingwen was all by herself. She was all alone there. His voice was still calm, but his arms suddenly swung out. He pointed at the collapsed cave entrance, at an area that ordinary people couldn't see. There she made her life's choice. The last time. The stupidest time. She was even stupider than her choice of Luo Zhongheng. She only chose a lump of flesh. Before she closes her eyes, that thing has no meaning. The sound wave quickly dissipated above the ruins. Some of it crashed into the collapsed cave entrance, causing a weak echo. Luo Nen didn't retort. He stood at the edge of the cave entrance. He could vaguely feel the almost non-existent slight vibration beneath his feet. Soul strength, which was more remarkable, covered an even larger area. It captured even more details. It far surpassed the domain that the basic 5 senses of a human could reach. But Luo Nan still felt that there was a layer of separation here. Since he came from flesh and blood, then he returned with flesh and blood was the correct principle. Luo Nan gazed at the fuzzy and chaotic cave bottom. A second passed before he spoke softly, "Take me there to take a look. I'll have to trouble you. Please." Chapter 11:26. Luo Yuan straightforwardly agreed to Luo Nan's request. It was so straightforward that Luo Nan suspected that Luo Yuan had come for this very reason. In comparison, persuading Professor Wu Zuanliang to obediently stay outside the collapsed area took a bit more effort. The old professor wasn't stupid. Of course, he could see the high tension between Luo Nan and Luo Yuan. He was afraid that the two would go down and start a fight, causing trouble. Luo Yuan wanted to go down the well. Lieutenant Colonel Chen and Captain Cho tried to persuade him. In the end, Luo Nan walked back and comforted him. "Professor, don't worry. I won't do anything today." Tang Yi rolled her eyes at Luo Nan. She turned her head and said with a smile, "Teacher, don't worry about this. When immortals fight, mortals suffer. If this continues, the ones who will collapse will be Lieutenant Colonel Chen and the others." Wu Zuanliang glared at her. "Immortals, my ass. What's so great about being an ability user? It's not like I haven't seen it before." Tang Yi's smile didn't change. In any case, once this membrane was pierced, some things would be easier to talk about. Wu Zuanliang nodded at Luo Nan. He raised his voice and shouted at Luo Yuan, "You guys have great abilities. I can't control you guys. It's fine if you don't let me go down, but give me a view sharing. You guys need to remember that I also came with a mission from my family." "Okay, we'll do as you say." Luo Nan was the first to agree. Luo Yuan also bowed, tacitly agreeing. Luo Yuan's method of coming over was too rough. He didn't have any electronic equipment on him, so the view sharing was left to Luo Nan. The hexa-ear he wore was very good at doing this. After activating the function, Wu Zuanliang didn't continue to nag. He just simply said through the sharing function, "Be careful." Luo Nan smiled at Wu Zuanliang. He and Luo Yuan directly sank into the depths of the collapsed hole. As they quickly descended, the sunlight that shone in from the entrance of the cave also weakened rapidly. Soon, only a distorted and swaying shadow silhouette was left in the human's natural vision. The breathing that Wu Zuanliang shared with him was clearly much heavier. For an old man who did not possess supernatural abilities, the experience of rapidly descending in a dark environment without any tools was still a little too stimulating. However, Wu Zuanliang didn't know that what he was able to share with Luo Nan was merely an insignificant small portion of Luo Nan's entire level of perception. Even if it was a simulation carried out by an intelligent instrument with night vision capabilities, it wouldn't be able to display even a fraction of Luo Nan's perception. Whether it was Luo Nan or Luo Yuan, they wouldn't rely purely on their natural vision to capture and process information in this complex dark environment. At this moment, the range, the frequency, and the way they interfered with the material plane represented the breadth, depth, and precision of their senses. Their respective senses would clash and interfere with each other, especially when there was Luo Nan, a perception freak that covered the entire region. The two of them didn't say anything, but their contact and probing on the level of perception never stopped. Luo Yuan's senses Luo Yuan. Luo Yuan's Luo Yuan's Luo Nan, Luo Yuan's Luo Nan, Lun, Nen, Luo I, Luo, Luo, and Luo Yuan's Nan. Nen. Luo Yuan Nan. But Luo Yuan Nan. Nan. Luo Yuan's Luo Yuan had long ago. Luo Nan didn't do this on purpose. He spent most of his energy observing the external environment. He observed the special area where his mother lived and eventually died. However, Luo Yuan's power circulation pattern was too unique. The parasitic clone before his eyes didn't count for anything. It was connected to Luo Yuan. It was an existence like a relay satellite that was outside of the local space-time environment. It was constantly moving in the dark side of space-time. It was far too eye-catching. Its mode of existence and position were very vague. It was separated from the local space-time by the fragmented isolation belt and the deep and distant polar domain. It was its natural cover. But Luo Nan could see it. He could see it more clearly than last year when he was hit by the dimensional crossbow. This was without a doubt the problem Luo Nan had pointed out through the mouth of the horned demon back in Format 70 laboratory. The most valuable thing Luo Yuan, a former laboratory member, obtained in the Misty Labyrinth was very likely a large fragment. It was hidden in the depths of the endless Misty Labyrinth like a sandstorm. It followed Luo Yuan's will and maintained a close yet distant connection with the local space-time of Earth. What Luo Nan was able to was basically this. There didn't seem to be any substantial breakthroughs compared to before. But the most important thing was the details. Conclusive details. I can't calculate the spatial structure distribution of the distorted fragment from 2 points and 1 line right now. But if I have a few more examples, maybe even fewer. The premise is that the trajectory isn't too complicated. Luo Nan felt that Luo Yuan would regret it in the future. Or it could be said that he would help Luo Yuan regret. Luo Yuan regretted carelessly exposing the connection between the parasitic clone and the plane of existence before him. The problem was, how did Luo Yuan know what level Luo Nan's current sensing mode was at? Even Luo Nan himself was still working hard to adapt. He was adapting to this wide area sensing mode based on the magnetic mica. Ever since he successfully cultivated the first magnetic light on the jadeite light and planted the true seed, the true meaning of the magnetic mica began to grow without interruption. Nearly a month's time was enough for the larval form of the magnetic mica to expand once more. This wasn't just a simple expansion into outer space. It also included the local space-time environment of Earth and the continuous infiltration of all neighboring planes. The situation in the deep blue world was a bit special. There was no obvious progress for the time being. But in the cloud world and even in the extremely broken environment of the Misty Labyrinth, the magnetic mica's sensitivity and activity continued to increase. Currently, the only thing that limited Luo Nan's perceptual ability was the structure of his brain. Luo Nan was immortal in the end. His brain was wet inside his skull, and it wasn't like a multi-core supercomputer. It was impossible for him to casually absorb the incalculable flow of information on the level of a trillion at all times. There were even more chaotic and even unstructured data fragments. So he used the magnetic mica's sensing nature to synthesize distance, danger, focus, and many other conditions to comb and build a new sensing network. The magnetic mica's material foundation was already infinitely close to the microscopic level, and the carrier structure was hard to grasp. Luo Nan's overall ability to observe information on the macroscopic level had yet to recover to the peak state of the water vapor cloak. But the coverage of his sensing domain, his grasp of key information, his sensitivity to danger, and even the efficiency of his instantaneous interference were far greater than before. There was no need to even mention his future potential. Time is on my side. Luo Nan lowered his head, temporarily burying his killing intent against Luo Yuan. This wasn't forbearance. This was planning. His thoughts had completely returned to the plane of reality, but it was unavoidable for him to link up with the past. There was frequent interference on the sensing plane. Ever since they entered the collapsed hole, the two hadn't spoken to each other. From this point of view, Luo Yuan couldn't be considered a qualified commentator, but Luo Nan didn't mind. The longer he stayed in this dark space, the more information his multidimensional perception could absorb and reorganize. Especially in a situation where Luo Yuan had already pointed out the direction. Luo Nan's tentacles of perception touched the target and the space that held the target a step earlier than his body. Frankly speaking, that place wasn't quite the same as what Luo Nan had imagined. In any case, Luo Nan and Luo Yuan continued to tread on mycelium, moss, stagnant water, and the bones of small animals as they headed in that direction. They passed through collapsed or half-collapsed passageways, as well as empty and dilapidated doorways. They traveled through the chaotic shadowy lines that they collectively constructed. If Luo Yuan was willing to speak, there should be many details worth recalling here. But even though he was silent, the fragments of information revealed in the chaos were still assembled and reconstructed in Luo Nan's mind. So much so that this dark and gloomy space seemed to gradually brighten up, returning to the appearance it once had 17 years ago. But when Luo Nan arrived at an area where most of the structure had collapsed and some parts were already submerged by underground water, he suddenly pressed the stop button. Only an ice-cold reality appeared before his eyes. Luo Yuan stopped walking, meaning, "We're here." Luo Nan didn't need to say much. He had already locked onto the only target within these ruins. The one that once bore Luo Nan's life, but also accelerated the stripping of his mother's life force. The health pod. The passage of time had already stripped away its original appearance. Even the supports beneath it had corroded away. It lay crookedly on the ground, half of it still soaking in the sewage. The pod's cover was sealed, and its integrity was fine. But the parts that were not wet were already covered in a thick layer of moss under the humid environment. The outline was a bit fuzzy. If one were to judge purely by their eyesight, it would be better to say that it was a rock that had fallen from the surrounding buildings rather than a health pod. Luo Nan's soul strength had carried out many rounds of probing before Luo Nan arrived. So he already knew that there was no nutrient fluid inside. It was empty and dry. Clearly, it had never been used since they abandoned the laboratory, or since Luo Nan was born. This thing didn't have a clear sense of existence, and it was very hard to naturally extend a special meaning. Even Luo Nan needed to decorate it with his memories and emotions. There was a bit of a difference. Comparatively speaking, the breathing of Professor Wu Zunliang that was shared with his ears had a more lifelike quality. "It's here. It's like this." Luo Yuan spoke for the first time since entering the collapsed cave. He was cold and direct. You can try your best to examine your emotions and assign a so-called value to it. But that is nothing more than a play to move yourself. It is meaningless to the deceased. Are you ready to howl? Luo Nan ignored him. He just knelt down on one knee, ignoring the puddles and filth on the ground. He slowly wiped away the thick moss on the surface, limiting it to a certain area. A few shallow and unnatural marks were carved on the surface of the health pod a few seconds later. These are scratches? From Luo Nan's perspective, the lower half of these marks was like a simple drawing of a smiling face. And above the smiling face were crisscrossed lines of unknown significance. There should be a pattern to them, but Luo Nan couldn't see it for the time being. "What is this?" Luo Nan asked subconsciously, but he didn't expect Luo Yuan to answer. But Luo Yuan still spoke a few seconds later. "Last words. Qing Wen's last words." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.